Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto x Hera Percy Jackson harem. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by WINDSTORM16 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. I should have known he couldn't remain loyal, even with an oath on the sticks. Thought Hera, the queen of Olympus and goddess of motherhood, marriage, family love and women, as she sat on her throne on Olympus, above the Empire State Building. The source of her anger is currently coming from the fact that, once again, her dear husband, Zeus, cheated on her again with another mortal woman and sired two new demigods. It wasn't even a surprise that not even a vow on the sticks could keep Zeus from running off to have another affair. It wouldn't even be that surprising if Poseidon ended up siring a demigod, also. What makes this even worse was that after siring the first demigod, a daughter named Thalia Grace, he went back to the woman, this time in his Roman form of Jupiter, and sired a son named Jason. So, not only did he cheat on her, but a Roman half-Juno as well, and with the same woman no less, along with naming his newest bastard after the only hero she liked. For what reason? Was it to appease her anger? Well, it didn't. It only pissed her off even more. Though if Hera was honest, she's not even really angry. After millennia of Zeus cheating on her with both mortals and goddesses alike, at this point she's just annoyed and tired. Tired of the constant cheating, of empty words and promises of loyalty, tired of it all. Not for the first time in her immortal life since Zeus first cheated on her, Hera wondered why. Why was she still married to Zeus when he clearly didn't value their marriage, given he's been having affairs since the times of ancient Greece? Back when their pantheon was still in a, regrettably, dark time and the Olympian gods were among the cruelest beings in existence. They could even be seen as worse than the Titans in certain regards back then. Even if they had all mellowed out over the centuries, that still didn't erase everything they did, they just chose to ignore it, with only a few gods and goddesses actually being willing to own up to being monsters back then. In fact, Hera was only married to Zeus because he tricked her by transforming into a wounded cuckoo, and when she helped him, he revealed himself and raped her. She only agreed to marry him out of shame of being exploited. Of course, Zeus only pursued her after he swallowed Metis, when he heard of a prophecy about her birthing a son that'd one day surpass him, along with separating from Themis after she birthed the three fates. Meaning I was just another notch under his belt, yay me. Hera thought sarcastically. Though she did shudder as she remembered the other times back in ancient Greece, when they were still seen as cruel and wicked, despite the worship they were given. Heck, one of the cruelest among them was actually Apollo, before he inherited the sun from Helios after their transition to Rome. It's also ironic, given his current personality, along with the domains he had even before becoming the god of the sun and light. After that line of thought, Hera shook her head, knowing that she's getting off topic, the topic being Zeus and his new demigods. That's it, I don't care anymore. Hera thought, before standing up from her throne. Thousands upon thousands of affairs, hundreds of demigods, millions of empty promises, and now breaking a vow on sticks. Hera no longer cared, and if Zeus thought he's the only one that can cheat on his spouse and sire demigods, he has another thing coming. What's better is that Hera isn't even going against her domain of marriage either, as all aspects of marriage fell under her domain, including cheating on your spouse. It was just counted more towards the dark side of marriages that Hera preferred to ignore. Instead, preferring to keep to the light side where couples remain loyal to each other. But now, Hera didn't care anymore. Only she had to think smart about how she did this, as well. Zeus had no problem being unfaithful to her, which was a colossal understatement. He was still possessive of her. Though at this point, Hera could safely say it was more in the sense of being a trophy wife, rather than true love. Her safest options would be to go to another part of the world, where their influence was minimal, or another realm entirely. The latter option seemed like the safest bet, since this way, Zeus won't learn of her affair or her child, until they were old enough to protect themselves. Opening a portal, Hera looked through the various realms of existence to decide where she'll go. Eventually, she settled on one, the elemental nations. Perfect. Hera thought with a smile. The elemental nations was a realm that worships a branch of the Shinto, Buddhist, and Hindu religions, since they worship deities whose influence has waned here, or just flat out didn't exist. It'll be perfect since Zeus will not discover her affair, plus from what she knows of the realm, there are some mortals that could rival, or even surpass, the gods' power at their current level. With her decision made, Hera divided her being and sent the separated half to the elemental nations. This way she won't arouse any suspicions by disappearing for months, or even years. Sitting back down in her throne, Hera released a sigh of contentment and as a small smile formed on her face. That felt rather liberating. Hera thought. Oh well, this is mostly to get back at Zeus. Hera couldn't deny that it feels good to get the chance to raise a child of her own. Given the godly children she's had with Zeus all grew up so quickly, and she threw Hephaestus off of Olympus because of his appearance. Perhaps I should try to spend more time with them. Thought Hera, wanting to try and be a better mother to her children, rather than always being angry over Zeus and his affairs. Elemental nations. Appearing in a forest, Hera looked around before smiling. The air here is so much cleaner. Thought Hera, as she felt the difference between the elemental nations and Earth. Though the moment was ruined when several mortals jumped out and surrounded her. Their clothing seemed similar to what was worn in feudal Japan, along with carrying Japanese weapons. While a normal person would be worried and afraid at being surrounded by multiple armed enemies, Hera wasn't normal. She was, however, annoyed that her moment of peace was interrupted. However, before she could simply kill the mortals for thinking they could attack her, someone beat her to it. Without warning, a comma attached to a chain came shooting out of the trees, impaling one of the mortals in the back. The wielder of the comma jumped out, revealing a man with long spiky jet black hair that wore a black shirt with a high collar that was left slightly open, with a red and white fan-shaped crest on its back, while also wearing blue pants and bandages around his shins. Before any of the mortals could react, he swiftly and efficiently killed all of them. It surprised Hera seeing someone fight like that, someone who was completely mortal from what she could sense. The stranger then turned towards Hera slowing, giving the goddess a clear view of shocking red eyes, with 3 tomos circling the pupil. Though immediately, the red eyes vanished, leaving only black ones gazing at her. Though one thing Hera noticed was not once did his eyes ever glance over her body, like she's seen other mortals and lesser gods do. "Who are you?" the man questioned in a deep baritone voice. "Hera. Thank you for helping me, sir. May I know my savior's name?" Hera asked, while playing the part of a defenseless mortal. He raised a brow at her question, telling Hera that this man was likely so well known that it surprised him that she doesn't already know who he is. "I am Madara Uchiha, leader of the Uchiha clan. Tell me, Hera, what are you doing out here alone?" Madara questioned, Hera noticing he hadn't loosened his grip on his weapons or relaxed, showing he considered her a potential enemy. She obviously couldn't tell him she's a goddess from another world, but she also couldn't come up with a false backstory, as she doubted this man was easy to lie to. So, her best bet would be to give part of the truth in a convincing lie. "I don't know. The last thing I remember was waking up here alone and then being surrounded by these people. After that I don't remember anything," Hera said as she looked down in sadness and confusion, while trying not to oversell her act. Madara frowned at those words. He could tell she's truthful about appearing here alone, he wasn't sure about the rest. She could be from an enemy clan that was trying to infiltrate the Uchiha clan, and this could have been entirely staged in order to gain his trust. Though she didn't look or move like a shinobi, and even if she was acting he could tell if someone has had shinobi training, just from the way they move or acted, and this woman had none of those signs. While he could just walk away and return to his clan, Madara doubted it'd sit right with him to leave a potentially innocent and amnesiac woman out here alone, where she could be killed or captured. For now, he'll play it safe and offer her help, but also keep an eye on her. "Very well, if you wish, you may return with me to my clan's home. You may stay as long as you wish as my guest, until you wish to leave or remember where you came from," Madara offered, with Hera nodding in surprise at his generous offer. "Thank you, Madara," Hera replied. Madara nodded and then motioned her to follow him. "Time skip. How about Konohagakure?" Madara said, while looking through a leaf at the village he and Hashirama had founded, standing on top of the same mountain they sat on as children. "That's such a lame name, not imaginative or creative," said Hashirama with an air of depression around him, causing Madara to gain a tick mark at his friend's behavior. "Neither is Hokage, you dumbus," Madara said, causing Hashirama's depression to increase at Madara insulting his name for the village leader, which served to further anger Madara that even now, Hashirama still acted like a child. Though both men's attention was grabbed when they heard a melodious giggle, making them turn to the source. Seeing who it was, Hashirama gave a friendly smile and waved, while Madara had a small smile. It was Hera Uchiha, Madara's wife, looking at the two in amusement. Since her arrival in the elemental nations, Hera has started wearing clothing that's more common here, but aside from that, the only physical change was that she now had long bright red hair, rather than her original black hair. She changed it to red after learning of the Uzumaki clan, a cousin clan of the Senjus, known for their skill in Fuinjutsu, their red hair, and the value they put on family. It was the last part that pleased Hera, and she was sure her sister Hestia would have loved it as well, at seeing a clan holding the bonds of family in such high regard. Hera had even changed her hair to red to always remember how important family was. Plus, she really liked the color. Not only that, but her time in the elemental nations has made her feel less angry and bitter. Here she was no longer Hera, the goddess and queen of Olympus, now she was just Hera, wife of Madara Uchiha. It reminded her of when she was sent to live with Aeneas and Tethys, and it was all thanks to her husband Madara. Sure, the first few months she lived at the Uchiha compound had been tense, since none of them had been sure if she was an enemy or not. But over time, she and Madara got to know one another and eventually became friends. Then when Hera felt she trusted him enough, along with having developed some feelings for the Uchiha, she had told him the truth of who she was and why she came to the elemental nations. Madara, surprisingly, believed her and took it rather well. Though one thing he said had convinced Hera to start a relationship with him. He had called Zeus an arrogant blind fool who would rather satisfy himself with mortal women than see he had the perfect woman by his side and that she deserved someone who would treat her as the queen she was. Safe to say Hera had given Madara a night he would never forget. After that, they only grew closer, with Hera even helping Madara through Azuna's death and preventing him from falling to his clan's curse of hatred, along with to accept the peace agreements Hashirama has offered. Though only on the condition he and Hashirama have one final fight as enemies, along with Madara wanting to test the power of his new eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. In the end the two clans joined together to form the village Madara and Hashirama dreamed of creating as boys, with Madara and Hera getting married soon after it was created. Hashirama and Hera had also become friends, with Hashirama happy his childhood friend found someone to make him happy and keep him from falling to the curse of hatred, while Hera was interested in learning more about her husband's rival friend. Though, she didn't tell him she was a goddess, since that was a secret only for Madara to know. But she was amazed at the bond between the two, coming from enemy clans, and yet they acted closer than brothers. Definitely more brotherly than Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon's relationship with each other. Though back to the story. Well, as interesting as it'd be to see Madara become Hokage, I believe he'll be rather busy with something else. Hera said with a smirk as she walked up to the two, who looked confused. Something else? You mean being clan head? I'm sure he can do both. Hashirama said. Hera smiled, shaking her head before grabbing Madara's hand and placing it on her stomach. No, something much more important. Hera said. It took them a moment to realize what she meant and Madara's eyes widened in shock while Hashirama's jaw dropped. You're sure? Madara asked, shocked at the prospect of being a father. Hell, he never even thought he'd live this long, given the shinobi life expectancy was rather low. Hera just smiled and nodded, being a goddess she could tell when she was pregnant, and this child will have a special place in her heart, not only for being her first demigod, but also being able to carry them for 9 months and raise them, teach them, everything. However, the moment was ruined when Hashirama immediately threw his arm around Madara's shoulder and grabbed him in a headlock. Yes. You're going to be a father, Mata-chan. And I get to be a godfather. Hashirama cheered loudly, though Madara felt his eyes twitching. Shut up, you fool. Who says you'll be godfather anyway? And don't call me Mata-chan, you idiot. Shouted Madara. Immediately Hashirama was sitting in front of a tree drawing circles on the ground with a storm cloud over him. So mean, Hashirama muttered with anime tears. Madara glared at him and made choking motions with his hands, wanting nothing more than to wrap his hands around his throat. Hera just smiled at their antics while rubbing her stomach. She might have had some doubts in the beginning of going through with this, but now she wouldn't trade her time here for anything in the world. Time skipped 12 years. Hera and her daughter looked down sadly at the gravestone in front of them. Madara Uchiha. Son, brother, husband, father. Rest in peace. He had come down with a terminal illness, and Hera, despite her power, wasn't able to do anything to help him. It was sad to see him grow weaker with each passing day, though he did a great job of hiding it, and even more painful when it finally caught up to him. Even more so that he couldn't be buried with the rest of his clan in Konoha. It had happened a few weeks after she told him she was pregnant. Madara had been accused of attempting to assassinate Tobirama Senju, Hashirama's younger brother. Though Madara claimed he was innocent, nearly everyone believed he did it, as it's known that Tobirama had been the one to kill Izuna, and Madara, despite making peace with the Senju, still held a grudge for his only remaining brother's death. With no other choice, Hashirama, who had been elected as Shadame Hokage, was forced to banish Madara, with Hera following her husband knowing he was innocent, along with to find out who framed him. It wasn't long until she found the culprit, a creature known as Black Zetsu, who had hoped to manipulate her husband into completing a plan to free its creator mother Kagaya Otsutsuki. Unfortunately, Zetsu never took into account of Hera being a goddess and possessing limited omniscience in regard to her domains, and while Zetsu wasn't human, he did love Kagaya like family, and that was enough to track down the creature and incinerate it with her power. After this, it wasn't long until Hera gave birth to their daughter, Kyoko Uchiha, who had long black hair like her father, usually tied up in a ponytail, and dark blue eyes. When she was old enough, Madara had started training Kyoko in everything he knew, with Kyoko having higher than average chakra pools, given her father was a powerful shinobi and her mother was a goddess. She had unlocked her Sharingan when she was 8 and mastered it by the time she was 9. Like her father, she could use all 5 elemental affinities, which made Hera smirk when she saw her daughter's mastery over wind, lightning, and water. While she didn't hold a grudge against Poseidon like she did against Zeus, it would still be something to rub in his face. Another thing Kyoko had gained was somewhat unnatural, but still another thing that will help her in the future. Before his departure from Konoha, Madara and Hashirama had one last fight, with the latter not really believing Madara tried to kill Tobirama, with the result of their fight having created the Valley of the End. It was after the fight Madara revealed he had bit off part of Hashirama's flesh and planned to use it to give their daughter his rival's fabled wood-style jutsu, given he knew Kyoko would eventually go to Earth and would need all the advantages she could get. Madara had also said that it would lead to Kyoko awakening an even greater power one day, but he never said what it'd be. In addition to her training from her father, Kyoko had also inherited several of her mother's powers as well, the most noticeable being her super strength. This was also something that brought joy to Hera, given the fact the strength her daughter possessed surpassed that of Hercules, given Kyoko was her daughter and was granted more of her power as a result. So, well, despite only being 12 years old, Kyoko was strong enough to be at high Jonin and low cage levels, with the only thing missing being real combat experience. Though after her father had died, Kyoko had awakened her Mangekyo Sharingan as a result, her Mangekyo taking the form of a swirl, similar to the Uzumaki clan sigil. Madara had left his old eyes to be transplanted to Kyoko, so she wouldn't go blind, though she hasn't implanted them yet due to being fine with her own eyes for now, instead keeping them sealed away for the day she'll need them. Madara had also left her a scroll for everything he hadn't been able to teach her before his death, along with his gunbai. Though the gunbai wasn't Kyoko's only weapon. "Kyoko, are you ready to go?" Hera asked while looking at her daughter, who nodded. "Yes, Ka-chan." Kyoko replied. Nodding, Hera placed a hand on Kyoko's shoulder before both vanished from the elemental nations entirely. Earth. Upon their arrival, Kyoko looked around, knowing she was now in her mother's home realm. "Welcome to Earth, Musum. I teleported us close to Camp Half-Blood, it'll be a good place for you to stay until you learn more about this world," Hera said, while knowing her daughter likely wouldn't remain a full-time camper, given the fact there's nothing she could learn there that she didn't already know or could learn on her own. Kyoko nodded with a frown. While she didn't like the thought of having to stay at a summer camp, perhaps there will be some that can dance with her, while also allowing her to finally interact with some people her own age. "I know I don't like it, but there's no other choice. With the ancient laws and your stepfather, I can't stay with you. It will also be some time before I can claim you, until you can properly defend yourself against any threat Zeus will no doubtfully send after you," Hera said with a frown, while Kyoko smiled up at her reassuringly. "I know, Ka-chan, and it's fine, I can wait," Kyoko said. Personally, Kyoko didn't really care about being officially claimed by her mother, she knew her mother loved her and didn't need to prove it to anyone else. If anyone tried challenging that, then she'll show them the power of an Uchiha. Hera smiled at her daughter, proud of her maturity. Leaning down, Hera kissed her on the forehead. "I love you, Kyoko, don't ever forget that," Hera said. "I won't, and I love you too, Ka-chan," replied Kyoko. Smiling, Hera stood up and her body started vanishing as she rejoined with her half that was still on Olympus. Though before she left, she said one last thing. "Also remember, don't use your swords unless absolutely necessary," Hera said sternly before she fully vanished. "Aw man," Kyoko thought, having hoped to show off her prized weapons, but mother just ended that plan. Shaking her head, Kyoko began walking towards Camp Half-Blood. On her way there, she spotted a giant pine tree, big enough to rival the ones her father's old friend rival Hashirama could create. Upon entering the camp, Kyoko was greeted by a centaur who she knew to be Chiron, the trainer of heroes, from what her mother told me. "Greetings, young demigod. I am pleased to see you have made it here safely, and I'm sure you have questions," Chiron said, having felt a new demigod arrive at camp. "Just one at the moment. Is there anywhere here that makes good ramen?" Kyoko asked. 2 months have passed since Kyoko arrived at Camp Half-Blood, and it was interesting to say the least. After meeting Chiron, she had been taken to the big house, where she met the other camp director Mr. D, also known as Dionysus, the god of wine, parties, madness, and theater. It had been an interesting meeting to say the least. Flashback. This is the big house, where I and the other director stay and greet the new demigods with the orientation film. It also doubles as the infirmary for any wounded. Chiron explained, while guiding Kyoko up to the deck, where she could see who she guessed was the second director sitting at the table with a few cans of Diet Coke. At first glance, the guy didn't look like much, with a chubby face, red nose, curly hair so black it looked purple, watery bloodshot blue eyes, and wearing a tiger-striped Hawaiian shirt. But Kyoko knew not judge someone based on their appearance alone, one of her father's lessons, and using her sensing ability, she could tell this guy wasn't human, he was a god. "This is Mr. D, our camp director," Chiron said. So this is Dionysus." Kyoko thought while going off his description from what her mother told her of the other gods. Oh, I suppose I must say it. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. There. Now, don't expect me to be glad to see you. Mr. D said while flipping through wine catalog before lowering it and looking at her with narrowed eyes. Is there problem? Kyoko asked with a raised brow. You have chakra, don't you? Stated Mr. D, with Kyoko being surprised that he could sense her chakra, along with Chiron being surprised that she had chakra. Yeah, I do, my name is Kyoko Echidna. Kyoko introduced. HMPH, and Echidna. Been a while since we had a demigod from another realm staying here, usually they're left to their own devices. Though don't think you'll get special treatment, I dislike all demigods equally. Said Mr. D, before going back to his catalog. Kyoko thought while feeling her eye twitch at how casually he dismissed her. She then turned her attention back to Chiron when he cleared his throat. Yes, well, as interesting as it'd be to hear more of this, let us continue the tour, Kyoko. Chiron said while motioning her to follow him. Then flashback. It was surprising that Mr. D and Chiron were aware of other realms and that the former could sense her chakra. It made her wonder if any other demigods or legacies are in the elemental nations at the moment. Though it was a relief that they already knew, so she didn't have to hide her jutsu and abilities. Afterwards, Chiron had shown her the rest of the camp. The cabins where demigods stay, with Kyoko having given her mother's cabin a longing look but knew she couldn't stay there yet. Along with also being shown the dining pavilion, the amphitheater, the armory, the climbing wall, the arena, the archery field, and the volleyball court. Once the tour was finished, he took her back to the cabins, specifically cabin 11, the Hermes cabin, where the unclaimed demigod stayed and introduced her to the cabin counselor, Luke Castellan. After that, Kyoko had spent the time wandering around and memorizing the campgrounds, that is until she was approached by a group of Aries kids. Flashback. Well. A newbie. Kyoko stopped walking as she looked behind her and saw a big, muscly girl, accompanied by 3 other girls, all big and mean looking, coming from cabin 5, Aries' cabin. It didn't take a genius to know their intentions, Kyoko was the new camper, and these were obviously the stereotypical bullies coming to initiate her. Though rather than be afraid, Kyoko smirked since she was hoping for a warm-up, along with a chance to show the other campers what she could do. Another of her father's lessons was to always show just who was in charge. The girl obviously saw her smirk and marched up to Kyoko in an attempt to intimidate her with her height and muscular frame. But given the fact that Kyoko was trained by Madara Echidna, a man whose very name struck fear into people's hearts and had power to crush armies, this girl might as well be a puppy in comparison. And what do you think you're smirking at, runt? The girl sneered while glaring down at Kyoko. Oh, I'm just wondering, is that supposed to be a boar head over the door or is it your better-looking sibling? It's really hard to tell. Kyoko taunted while motioning to the large boar head above cabin 5's door. The girl growled in anger and reached to grab Kyoko by her neck, which proved to be a mistake. Quicker than the girl could react, Kyoko grabbed her wrist and effortlessly lifted her off the ground, much to the shock of the crowd that had gathered to see the confrontation. What the hell? The girl shouted in shock at being lifted into the air like this by someone half her size. Kyoko just smirked before throwing the girl back into her siblings, knocking them all to the ground into a pile. Let this a warning, I was trained to kill since I could walk and I'm strong enough to shatter bones. Piss me off and I'll show you what I do to those that anger me. Kyoko said before walking away, with everyone clearing a path while looking at her in shock and awe at her display. Then flashback. The girl, Clarice LaRue was her name, hadn't been too happy about what happened but apparently learned from what happened the first time and didn't try anything again. But Kyoko still saw her glaring in her direction from time to time. Most of the other demigods that saw what happened were either amazed at her display of strength or intimidated of what else she could do. Which was just fine for Kyoko, as it gave her more time to train without interruptions. Currently, Kyoko was in the forest, training with shadow clones. The shadow clone jutsu was a rather useful jutsu that her father taught her. It was useful in that unlike other clone techniques, when a shadow clone dispels, anything the clone learned or experienced is transferred back to the original. Though it came at the cost of taking chakra to use, and while Kyoko had high chakra pools for someone her age, she still was limited in the number of clones she could make. Currently, Kyoko could create 15 clones, and while it wasn't many, they were still useful in her training. At the moment she had 3 clones working on using Amaterasu and better manipulating the flames, another 3 working on her second Mangekyo ability. Along with having one more group of 3 working on the wood style, which she already had a good grasp of, but couldn't perform the larger scale jutsu. And finally, the last 6 were working on Kenjutsu, an art that required the most concentration given how difficult it is to learn. The reason Kyoko took up Kenjutsu wasn't only because of how versatile and powerful it could be, but also because of her mother's fondness for the Uzumaki clan. Plus, one thing Kyoko hoped to do was recreate Tobirama Senju's Hiraishin Jutsu and make it better, simply as a way to show an Uchiha did something better than a Senju. What? Her father may have made peace with the Senju clan, but that didn't mean he liked all of them. Kyoko, herself, was going through her daily exercises, though she was distracted when a familiar voice spoke up. I don't think I've seen a demigod ever train as hard as you do. Looking over in the direction of the voice, Kyoko saw Annabeth Chase, a daughter of Athena. Annabeth had been one of the demigods to witness Kyoko take out Claris and her sisters, all while developing an interest in finding out more of Kyoko and her abilities. At first, her constantly pestering Kyoko was annoying and distracting, but eventually the Uchiha finally started answering some of Annabeth's questions. Not all of them, just enough to sate the girl's curiosity. Oh well, she could be nosy and a little prideful, which was expected given who her mother is. Kyoko could tell she was a nice girl who just needed to learn to relax and have fun a little. Yeah, well, I also don't plan to stay here year-round. So, I need to be at my best for when I leave, in the event I encounter some of the stronger monsters. After all, the stronger the demigod, the stronger the monsters they attract. Kyoko said, having already planned to leave once the summer was over. She just wasn't made to stay at camp, she was a fighter like her father and wanted to see what else this world had to offer for her. Though, that doesn't mean she won't come back during the summer, since she does like spending time with the friends she made here. Right, anyway, dispel your clones, it's time for our study session. Annabeth said, while looking at the clones, having been the one chosen to teach Kyoko about the history and nature of the world, along with tutoring her on Greek mythology. She'd be lying if she said that she wasn't jealous when Kyoko told her the purpose of the clones. Being able to create copies of yourself that transfer back everything they've learned, it's something any child of Athena would kill to have. Nodding, Kyoko got up to her feet. Well, she didn't really need tutoring on Greek mythology, given her mother already told her about ancient Greek and Roman legends, with them being the uncensored versions as well. Hera had been hesitant in telling Kyoko the true myths, given they didn't cast the gods in a positive light, herself included. She also didn't want to risk her daughter finding out on her own and ended up hating her. Kyoko had been horrified to learn about the crimes and horrors the gods committed, her mother included, though Kyoko did eventually forgive Hera. Having accepted that it was a different time and her mother was a different person from how she is now. And despite this, Kyoko's knowledge wasn't perfect, and while the stories may be the watered-down versions to make the gods look better to their kids, she may still learn something from them. The only problem, however, was that it required book learning. When her mother was teaching her, she told the legends in the form of stories to make them interesting and keeping Kyoko focused, given she was a kinesthetic learner, thanks to in part her ADHD and dyslexia from being a demigod. Plus, it's one thing to learn jutsu from scrolls, which were thankfully written in ancient Greek, since she just needed to memorize the hand seals and mechanics behind them. But full-on book learning just wasn't her forte. This was also why Kenjutsu was difficult for her to learn, aside from being a difficult art to learn to begin with. Also, it didn't help that with Kenjutsu, she had to write the seals in kanji, which was murder for someone with a brain that was hardwired for ancient Greek. Sighing in resignation, Kyoko had the clones begin dispelling in 10-minute intervals, with the ones learning Kenjutsu being dispelled one at a time every 5 minutes. Seeing this made Annabeth roll her eyes, but didn't say anything, knowing the dangers of dispelling too many clones at once and that it's not just Kyoko's way of stalling. Though she did look worried when Kyoko rubbed her eyes in pain. Are you alright? Annabeth asked, as Kyoko gave a nod in confirmation, with her eyes closed. Yeah, I'm fine, just give me a minute. Kyoko said, while waiting for her eyesight to settle. While the shadow clones did help with mastering her Mangekyo abilities without fear of blindness, Kyoko still had to deal with the feedback of her clones' training, along with blurry eyesight from seeing things from her clones' point of view. Blinking a couple times, Kyoko saw that the last of her clones had just dispelled and she started sorting through the information she got. Once she finished, she followed Annabeth to begin the study session, while cursing the other girl at waiting until after her training to started. The reason being that during their first session, Kyoko had used both shadow clones and the Sharingan to learn things more quickly, leading to Annabeth actually cursing at how unfair it was and extending the session further. She did wisen up and wait until after Kyoko's used her clones during training before starting their study sessions, this way she'd still be tired from using the clones. Along with forbidding her from ever using the Sharingan in their study sessions ever again. It annoyed Kyoko at not being able to use clones to help study, and she had considered only using half her clones for training, while using the other half for studying, but she didn't for a couple reasons. The first being she didn't want to put off her training like that, and second, she was sure Annabeth would just wait for her clones to run out of chakra, then give her an extra long study session. As for the Sharingan, let's just say that after being punished for using her Sharingan the first time, despite the ban, she swore on the sticks that she'll never use her ninjutsu to cheat during their study sessions ever again. Along with getting some mind healers to erase the memories of the things that Annabeth made her watch and look at with her Sharingan active. By the way, Chiron just got back today. Annabeth said, making Kyoko smile at that, while feeling glad to hear that Chiron was back. During her time at camp, the centaur had become a mentor-uncle figure to her, which was ironic since he technically was her uncle on her mother's side and has given her advice and wisdom whenever he can. It surprised Kyoko that some of it actually helped her as well, given her past training with her parents, but she supposed it came from how long he's been alive and the number of heroes he's trained over the millennia. I'll be sure to meet him later, at the pinnacle table once we're done. Kyoko replied. Later. I have really got to learn to do that. Kyoko said after she finished watching an episode of Yu Yu Hakusho on her laptop. One thing she had gotten into on Earth was reading and watching manga and anime. Not only because some of them reminded Kyoko of her home dimension, but they also were really fun to watch and gave her new ideas for attacks to recreate. Her laptop was something she asked Charles, a son of Hephaestus, to make for her after she learned about the internet and have used it to watch anime. Some of her favorites were Yu Yu Hakusho and Bleach, with her favorite character in the former being Hae because of his Dragon of the Darkness flame and how similar it was to Amaterasu. It was something Kyoko hoped to recreate with Amaterasu, unleashing giant black dragons made of flames. While with Bleach, she was interested in the idea of recreating the various Zanpakuto from that series with seals. Or maybe even see if she can have any of them commissioned from Cabin 9. Currently, Kyoko was sitting on the roof of the Hermes cabin, watching an anime on her laptop and reading up on the Bleach manga. Usually any campers caught outside their cabins at night would end up as harpy food, but the harpy stayed far away from Kyoko after she launched a fireball at them when they tried attacking her. Like hell she was going to run from those damn flying rats. Sealing away her stuff, Kyoko jumped down and proceeded to go for a walk since she wasn't feeling that tired. While traversing through the camp though, Kyoko couldn't help but notice the raging storm that was going outside the barrier. Man, dear old stepdaddy must really be in a foul mood tonight. I'm actually surprised that it hasn't blown into the camp yet despite how hard it's coming down. Kyoko thought as she raised an eyebrow at the storm that was raging. Eventually she found herself at the big house and saw that the lights were still on, though before she could see what was going on, she heard someone behind her. Looking, Kyoko was surprised to see a black-haired kid carrying an unconscious adder before collapsing on the ground. Checking to make sure they were still alive, Kyoko heard someone running towards her and saw Annabeth and Chiron, the latter of whom had a look of recognition at the two boys. Chiron, who are these two? Kyoko asked. The boy is Percy Jackson, a demigod I had been observing for a while, with the satyr is Grover Underwood as watcher. Annabeth, help Kyoko bring the two of them to the infirmary, please. Chiron said. Nodding, the girls picked up Percy and Grover and brought them inside. Soon. Kyoko stopped in her tracks and looked back with wide eyes. Mom? Kyoko sighed as she closed her manga while she sat in the infirmary within the big house. 3 days had passed since the unexpected arrival of Percy Jackson and his satyr protector, Grover Underwood, with the former having remained unconscious the entire time and still showing no signs of waking up. Both Kyoko and Annabeth have been taking turns watching Percy under Chiron's instructions to see when he'll wake up. Personally, while Kyoko found it annoying with how it cut into her training, she was also thankful for the break it gave her from studying Greek mythology with Annabeth. Don't get her wrong, she likes hanging out with Annabeth, but Kyoko will forever despise book learning. Kyoko mostly passed the time by reading manga and/or thinking up new ideas for attacks. She's currently reading One Piece, having found the devil fruits and the powers that they grant to the people who eat them to be very interesting. Her personal favorite had to be the Maramara no Mi and hoped to be able to gain enough control over fire to use Ace's attacks, along with seeing if she can recreate other techniques and fighting styles, like the Rakishiki and Ryusuken for example. Maybe I should see about teaching the black leg style to Cabin 9, should I be able to recreate it. Since it revolves around kicking, it would be the perfecting fighting style for them, since they won't have to worry about getting their hands injured. Kyoko thought to herself, since the demigod children of Hephaestus tend to take after their father and become blacksmiths, builders and/or mechanics. So, having a fighting style where they won't have to worry about their hands and arms getting injured or crippled would be invaluable to them. On another note, Annabeth had also introduced Kyoko to Grover, who also happened to be the satyr that brought her and Luke to Camp Half-Blood. They immediately became good friends, with it helping that Kyoko has a connection to nature due to her Mokuton. Shaking her head, Kyoko looked at the still unconscious Percy before letting out a sigh in boredom. If only I had a marker. Kyoko thought morosely, since both Chiron and Annabeth made sure she didn't have anything on her when she was watching Percy. While Kyoko wouldn't call herself a prankster, she also was never one to resist the chance to screw with someone. Deciding to take a break, Kyoko got up and went outside to the pinochle table for another game. She immediately saw Mr. D and Chiron, who was currently in his wheelchair, sitting there upon arrival, with the former grumbled when he saw her, while the latter smiled as he gave her a nod. Annabeth was also there and is currently leaning against the porch railing. "Kyoko? How's Percy?" Chiron asked, wishing to know the status of his favorite student from Yanxi Academy. "Still unconscious, I figured I'd come out here for a game. Unless you're scared of losing again," Kyoko said with a smirking, as the latter's statement is directed at Mr. D, whose eye was twitching. "Sit down, Kimiyagawa," Mr. D said, already shuffling the deck while Chiron did his best not to grin. Kyoko merely smirked and sat down. Mr. D's annoyance came from the fact that every time Kyoko played pinochle, she won. Every single time. It was infuriating to the god as he couldn't win even one game, nor tell if she was bluffing with her cards. Though given that she learned to mask her emotions from her father, it wasn't really a surprise. There were times when Mr. D was tempted just to quit and not play against her, but his pride as both a god and an Olympian, plus his disdain for demigods in general, made it so he can't accept losing to Kyoko until he could beat her at least once. Chiron had even once joked that Kyoko must be blessed by Titch, given her luck. "Okay, but don't start crying when I win again, Daisuke," Kyoko said while taking her cards, making Mr. D's eye twitching again at the nickname. It was something Kyoko had taken to doing after getting tired of Mr. D purposefully mispronouncing her name, with her now doing the same to him. "Annabeth, you wanna play?" Kyoko asked, with the blonde girl giving her a deadpan look that spoke loudly of her response. Kyoko merely pouted, before shrugging. "She'll corrupt her eventually. Later." Kyoko smirked as she looked at Mr. D, whose eye was now twitching madly as he looked at her cards, showing she had won yet again. "You cheated," Mr. D stated, more so trying to convince himself than anything, while Kyoko merely rolled her eyes. "Whatever helps you sleep at night," said Kyoko, before looking over her shoulder when she heard footsteps and saw Grover, as well as Percy surprisingly, up and walking. "Mr. Brunner?" Percy said in shock when he recognized his Latin teacher sitting with a small porky guy that looked like he's had too much to drink and a black-haired girl that Percy vaguely recognized. "Ah good, Percy. Now we have 4 for pinochle," Chiron said joviously. "No," Mr. D said rather quickly before coughing to cover it up. "I mean, Yuchikawa already played. You take her place," Mr. D said while pointing at Grover, who bleated nervously. "You just don't want to lose again, Donnie," Kyoko taunted before standing up and facing the two boys. "Welcome to camp and good luck, you're gonna need it," Kyoko said while patting Percy on the shoulder, with her words doing nothing to reassure the confused boy of what's happening. Kyoko gave Annabeth a wave before heading down to the arena to catch up on her training. Especially since she won't be working on her more dangerous or difficult techniques today, so she won't need the privacy of training in the forest. Though on the way there, Kyoko stopped by the Pegasus and Horse stables to visit one of her friends, with the Uchiha soon smiling when she found who she was looking for. A girl her age, who is very beautiful with long black hair and blue eyes, while wearing the standard orange camp shirt, jeans, and boots. "Hey Selena," Kyoko greeted, getting the girl's attention from brushing one of the Pegasi. Looking in her direction, Selena smiled before walking over and hugging Kyoko, which the Uchiha returned. "Kyoko, it's good to see. How are you? Is the new camper awake?" Selena asked once they separated. Selena Beauregard, a daughter of Aphrodite and one of the rare few that wasn't shallow, conceited, or obsessed with her looks. She was a surprisingly nice girl who also wasn't afraid to stick up for herself for getting dirty. Again, unlike the rest of her siblings. They had met during Kyoko's first visit to the stables, with Selena offering Kyoko some flying lessons, to which Kyoko had politely refused. Mostly because she didn't want to tempt fate by being in her stepfather's domain. Though she did come by every now and then to help Selena tend to the Pegasi and horses, which she was thankful for, especially when Kyoko had her clones helping, as well. She also gave Selena some lessons on hand-to-hand combat and using weapons, given she was willing to learn how to fight. Plus, Kyoko was interested in Selena's charm speak ability, with how similar it was to Jinjutsu, and wanted to see if she could replicate it with the said ninja art. "I'm good and the new kid just woken up. I'm sure either Chiron or Annabeth will be showing him around soon. What about you?" Kyoko asked while grabbing a brush and began helping Selena groom the Pegasi and horses. "Same, just the usual problems," Selena said in exasperation as she thought of the said problems. "Let me guess, the problem being tall, Asian, and wears an entire store's worth of makeup." Kyoko said in disdain, while Selena let out a sigh. On, sure Drew can be, Selena trailed off, while trying to think of something in her half-sister's defense, as even if Drew can be rude and obnoxious, she's still her sister. Rude, arrogant, narcissistic, and a pathologically condescending tyrant. Kyoko listed in a deadpan tone. If there was one demigod Kyoko hated, it was Drew Tanaka. She embodied everything Kyoko hated about girls her age, only caring about her looks and using her looks to get boys to fall in love with her, only to break their hearts afterwards. Kyoko knew for a fact that if Drew, or any of Aphrodite's children for that matter, besides Selena, had been born in the elemental nations, they wouldn't have lasted a day on the battlefield before they were slaughtered, or worse. Okay, I see your point. Selena muttered after she couldn't think of a rebuttal, while knowing Drew was all those things. So, what about the new kid, did he really kill the Minotaur? Selena asked, with Kyoko shrugging in response. I guess, he had a horn with him. But I think it was just luck. Said Kyoko, since from what she saw, Percy didn't really look like much of a fighter. Still, it's amazing that he was even able to kill it without a weapon. Said Selena, since most demigods would need a weapon to kill a monster like the Minotaur. Well, we'll see soon if he can dance or if he'll miss his steps. Said Kyoko, with Selena covering her mouth, but a few giggles still escaped, making the Uchiha look at her. Sorry, it's just, I don't think I've heard anyone refer to fighting as a dancing, Selena said, despite having gotten used to how her friend refers to things differently than others. Kyoko just shrugged at her words. That was how her dad always talked, referring to fighting as dancing, and she saw it as the same way. After helping Selena tend to the rest of the Pegassian horses, Kyoko waved farewell to her friend and headed for the arena, like she originally planned. On the way there, Kyoko passed by the hearth that's at the center of the cabins and spotted a girl that looked to be around her age, tending to it. She had blue eyes and black hair that was tied into twin pigtails that reached her mid-thighs, with the accessory having blue and white petals, along with a bell-shaped ornament. As for her attire, she wore a white mini dress with two blue ribbons, one was tied around her neck and the other tied under her breasts, with their size emphasizing her small frame, while also wearing a pair of white gloves, as well. Though, rather than being worried about her being so close to the flames, Kyoko smiled as she knew who it was from the aura of warmth and familial love surrounding her. And Hestia. Kyoko thought. As if hearing her thoughts, Hestia looked at Kyoko with her bright blue eyes flickering with the flames and looked at the Uchiha in surprise. Waving at the petite goddess, Kyoko continued on to the arena. Later. Kyoko walked alongside the rest of Cabin 11 with the new addition of Percy Jackson as they made their way to the dining pavilion. It was annoying, sitting at the overcrowded table when there were 4 perfectly good empty tables, 2 of which are hopefully never going to be used, and the third was only used when the hunters showed up. You'd think Artemis would at least allow the unclaimed female demigods to use her cabin when the hunters aren't here, given she's the protector of young maidens and all that. Kyoko thought, while rolling her eyes as the wood nymphs came out of their trees and began setting food on the tables. Kyoko immediately grabbed a bowl of ramen, while having her cup filled up with lemonade. Though before they could eat, they had to offer some of the food to their godly parents. Mom and Hestia. Kyoko thought as she gave her own offering. She always made an offering to her mom and her aunt Hestia, with the latter being so the eldest Olympian knew she wasn't forgotten. Once everyone made their offerings and had sat down, Chiron and Mr. D announced the activities for the week. Including the Capture the Flag game on Friday, before ending things by introducing Percy as a new camper, with Chiron needing to correct Mr. D on his name. After everyone ate, they all returned to their cabins to rest for the morning. Time skipped 3 days. Percy groaned as he was once again knocked to the ground with Kyoko standing over him with a celestial bronze katana in her hand. You're getting better, you've lasted longer this time. Kyoko said as they were currently in Percy's first sword fighting lesson. Percy just gave her a blank look. I lasted a minute. Last time it was 30 seconds. Percy stated dryly. Which is still better and that's what matters, no matter how short the spar is, the only thing that's important is that you're improving. How's the sword by the way? Kyoko said, while pulling Percy up as he looked at his sword, which was a medium-length Xiphos sword. Better, but it still doesn't feel right. Said Percy, since out of all the practice swords that were available, this one felt the most right, but it still felt somewhat off in his hand. The day after he had arrived at Camp Half-Blood, Percy was immediately pulled into attending all the camp activities. In the morning, he studied ancient Greek alongside Kyoko, with Annabeth as their teacher, with Percy finding out that Annabeth was right about his dyslexia, finding it easier to read ancient Greek, at least easier than English. After that, it was archery with Chiron, with Percy learning that he had no talent in it, given he almost accidentally shot Chiron's tail. Kyoko, however, showed she was the opposite, though instead used kunai, shuriken, and senbon, while expertly throwing them at all the targets. It was the same with all the other activities. In foot racing, Kyoko blew past all of them with ease, even the wood nymph instructors, who were upset, given they've had centuries of experience by running from lovesick gods. Wrestling. The only ones who dared get in the ring with Kyoko were the Aries kids, and they always ended up being sent flying out by her crazy strength. The only thing Percy seemed to excel at was canoeing, which wasn't really a heroic skill, but even then, Kyoko was able to do something better. After all, who needed a canoe when you can just walk across water? Percy also knew that the older campers and counselors were watching him, trying to figure out who his father was, but no one could figure it out. He couldn't fight like Ares' kids, he wasn't good at archery like Apollo's, didn't have any talent in blacksmithing like the Hephaestus' kids, or gods forbid Dionysus' ability with strawberries or grapes. Luke had suggested that he might be a child of Hermes, but Percy figured that was just him trying to make him feel better. It was even more of a mystery in regards to who Kyoko's godly parent was, given her talent in all activities and the fact her godly parent was her mother. Most would have guessed she was a child of Athena, but she wasn't blonde or have gray eyes, she wasn't obsessed with beauty or clothes like Aphrodite's children, though most did assume that she was a daughter of Demeter when they saw her using the Mokuton, only she wasn't claimed. It was a mystery that no one was able to figure out so far. It was now Thursday with Percy's first sword fighting class, with Kyoko and Luke as the instructors. The practice sword Percy originally had didn't feel right in his hand, so Kyoko got him several to try until he found one that worked. It soon came time for sparring, with Kyoko announcing that Percy would be her partner. What followed was Percy losing count of how many times Kyoko knocked him down again and again, with Percy failing to land even a single hit on her. Though this is to be expected, given Kyoko was trained by her parents since she could walk, and let it be known that Madara and Hera were absolute slave drivers. Though I doubt that I'd be able to get a hit in or manage to keep up, even if I had a sword that was right for me. Percy said, before one of their cabin mates spoke up. Kyoko's the best swordswoman at camp. Before, Luke was the best swordsman in the last 500 years, until she managed to break his streak. The camper said, with Percy looking at Luke in surprise as the older camper nodded in confirmation. She laid me flat on my back more times than I care to admit. Luke admitted, willing to accept that Kyoko was the superior fighter. Don't sell yourself short, Luke. Besides, I'm actually not that good at fighting with only one sword, I prefer dual wielding. Kyoko said humbly, not wanting to be praised when she's not even fighting at her best. That made Percy gulp, given he's seen how good Kyoko is at using one sword, he definitely didn't want to see what she can do with two. That's just like you. The strongest demigod at camp who could probably take all of us on, and you say your skills aren't good enough. Said Travis Stoll, a son of Hermes and a resident prankster, along with his younger brother, Connor. Your standards for fighting are more ridiculous than the girls in Cabin 10's standards for their looks. Just how strong do you need to be until you're satisfied? Connor asked as he rolled his eyes. Kyoko just shrugged as she doubts she'll ever reach that point. It was something she inherited from her father, her perfectionist attitude. They'd always keep at something until they mastered it, whether it's bijutsu, taijutsu styles, weapons, anything they set their minds to, they wouldn't stop until they had it mastered. After a short break they got back to sparring, though Kyoko narrowed her eyes in confusion when she saw Percy looked completely rejuvenated after pouring water over his head. Interesting. Kyoko thought. Without hesitation, Kyoko went after Percy, only to be surprised when he managed to block her thrust and he seemed to be moving more fluidly. She deflected Percy's thrust before narrowing her eyes again and decided to try a little harder. Kyoko watched as Percy seemed to react on pure instinct, and the next thing she knew, her katana was knocked out of her hands, much to the shock of everyone watching. Sorry. Percy said nervously, not really sure how he did that. Picking up sword, Kyoko looked at Percy with a strange look. Do that again. Said Kyoko, wanting to test a theory she now has. Another spar went by, with Percy lying on the ground once again. The campers muttered how it must have been beginner's luck. Kyoko, however, had other thoughts. He suddenly became rejuvenated after he poured water on himself and managed to disarm me. There's also that incident with the toilet when he first arrived, both incidents involved him being nearer in contact with water. Kyoko thought worriedly. She was beginning to think that Percy was the child of a deity that's related to water. If that's the case, she hopes it's a minor god, otherwise there's a chance Percy may be the son of Poseidon. If that's true and Poseidon broke his oath like Zeus, then Kyoko was starting to understand why her mother contacted her this early. Kyoko just hopes she's wrong, otherwise things will be getting a lot more complicated. Time skip one day. Kyoko sighed in boredom as she sat in front of the flag. It was Friday night, meaning it was time for capture the flag, and Annabeth had stuck her with the boring job of guarding the flag. It was boring, but Kyoko understood why Annabeth put her here. She is one of the stronger members of the team and can deal with anyone that tries taking the flag. Doesn't mean I have to enjoy it. Kyoko thought boredly as her head rested against her hand. Thankfully though, Kyoko soon heard the conch horn, making her sigh in relief as the game was over. Getting up, Kyoko headed to the border to see who had managed to grab the flag. Though when Kyoko arrived, she stopped and immediately began to mentally curse what she saw. It is determined. Poseidon, Earthshaker, Stormbringer, father of horses. Hail, Perseus Jackson, son of the sea god. Chiron announced as all the demigods bowed to Percy, who had a holographic green trident floating above his head. Well shit. Kyoko thought. Though her attention was turned away from Percy's claiming to a loud roar as a hellhound jumped out of the wood straight towards Percy. Get down. Kyoko shouted. Faster than anyone could blink, Kyoko had appeared in front of Percy while the hellhound split in half as it dissolved into dust. Another one? Annabeth said, shocked that another hellhound appeared. Another one? Asked Kyoko while frowning. The hellhound, it appeared and Percy killed it, then he was die immortals, Annabeth stuttered as she looked at Kyoko with wide eyes and turned deathly pale. What? Kyoko asked as she looked around to see all the demigods, satyrs and nymphs looking at her with shocked and pale expressions, with Grover having fallen over in a cold faint. Mr. D looked at his drink with wide eyes before taking a quick sip to make sure he hadn't somehow summoned something with alcohol. Nope, definitely Diet Coke. I'm definitely not seeing things. Mr. D muttered with wide eyes. Kyoko was confused and worried about what was going on until Percy tapped her shoulder, getting her attention before pointing above her head. Looking, Kyoko's immediately eyes widened as floating above head was a holographic pink peacock feather. Oh no. Kyoko thought in dread. Chiron was the first snap out of his shock and shakily raised his arms. I it is determined. H Hera, Q Queen of Olympus, Queen of H Heaven, P Patron of W Women, G Goddess of Ma Marriage, Mo Motherhood, Fa Family, Home, and Ch Childbirth. Hail Kyoko Uchiha, daughter of the Queen. The demigods bowed again, only this time they all looked terrified, given they might now be standing in what might potentially be ground zero for when Zeus finds out his wife cheated on him and had a demigod. Meanwhile, Kyoko mentally cursed up and down. This wasn't supposed to happen, the plan was to wait until she was 16 or 18, so she can have a few years to get strong enough to protect herself from Zeus and his anger, along with anything he might send after her. And putting aside the oath on the river Styx, surely Poseidon claiming Percy as his son wouldn't be enough to warrant her mother throwing that plan out the window and claiming her this early. Just what was going on? Kyoko looked around at all the gathered demigods, who were now standing up, while sporting terrified expressions as they looked between her and the sky. Understandable, given the reveal of just who her mother is, the fact that lightning wasn't already raining down on her was a miracle. Even Chiron and Mr. D looked nervously at the sky. The only person who didn't look terrified or nervous was Percy. Though, that probably might be due to him still being in shock from the revelation of his own claiming and who his father is. You're the daughter of Hera? Percy asked, well more confused than afraid, since Grover had told him Hera never had affairs or demigods, that was her husband's job. And you're the son of Poseidon, making us cousins. Kyoko said, while patting Percy on the back, making him stumble lightly, even with her training to control her strength. After all, she didn't want to accidentally break someone's hand with a handshake or snap their spine with a hug. Though she's still pretty strong, despite the said training. I'll be getting settled into my mom's cabin, Chiron. Kyoko said, with the centaur nodding slowly as he was still processing what just happened, as well as being worried of a lightning bolt shooting down at any moment and killing them all. Meet me at my cabin in the morning. Now that we know who your dad is, I have a few things that you could benefit from. Kyoko said to Percy, since she now knew whose son he is, she had some things he could use, given the powers he no doubtfully inherited. Plus, she was taught the values of family, and given how people were looking at Percy before her claiming, she knew things will get difficult for the son of Poseidon. And she wasn't going to let her cousin fend for himself, not if she could help him. Percy nodded slowly at her words, since he was still coming to terms at finally knowing who his father was. And never did he expect it would be Poseidon, an Olympian as well as one of the big three. Seeing him nod, Kyoko left the forest and headed for cabin 2, she didn't need to stop at cabin 11, since she always kept her stuff sealed away, on her person. Like hell she's going to leave her stuff lying around near the children of Hermes, the god of thieves. Olympus. Meanwhile, things were much more chaotic on Olympus. The Olympian throne room was in an uproar over the reveal that not only had Poseidon also broken his vow on Styx and sired a son, but the biggest shock of all was learning that Hera, of all the gods and goddesses, had sired a demigod. Hera knew what she did was a huge gamble and risk, not only for herself, but her little girl as well. But with how things were when she remerged with her half on Olympus and learning that the Master Bolt had been stolen, with Zeus blaming Poseidon, while Poseidon demanded an apology, it was looking like war would break out any day now. It didn't help when Poseidon claimed Percy Jackson as his son, leading to Hera claiming Kyoko in the hope she can at least direct some of Zeus's anger away from their brother and nephew. While it may not stop the war, hopefully it will delay it and buy them some more time to find the Master Bolt, as well as who the real thief is. Though she knew that she'll have to make it up to Kyoko, since she had just put a giant target on her daughter's back. The goddess's attention was then turned back to her husband when he started shouting at her. "Hera. What is the meaning of this? Give me a reason why I shouldn't smite that girl." Zeus demanded as thunder boomed overhead and lightning jumping off his frame in anger. He had already been angry to learn that Poseidon had broken his oath, ignoring the hypocrisy of it, given he broke his oath first and did it twice, but to see his own wife had also cheated on him and sired a demigod. He was practically apocalyptic. The last time Hera had seen Zeus this mad at her was during the time she, Poseidon, Apollo, and Athena had chained him up and tried forcing him to be a better ruler. Only he had been freed and punished all of them, with Hera's punishment being hung over the void of chaos, with Zeus showing up every day, threatening to sever the chains and watch her fall into the void. She was only saved after Hephaestus freed her. If it was before her time in the elemental nations, Hera would be cowering at his anger and the fear of really being thrown into the void. But this time, he had threatened her daughter and she was pissed at any threat to her child. "You want to know the meaning of this, beloved husband?" Hera asked in a deathly calm voice before she stood up and glared right back at Zeus, who recoiled at once again seeing her famous temper she inherited from their father, the same temper that everyone, even Zeus, was terrified of. "I'm giving you taste of your own damn medicine, you fucking hypocrite," Hera shouted in rage. "For dozens of millennia, I have had to deal with you and your constant affairs, demigods, and empty promises of loyalty. I wasn't even surprised that a vow on the river Styx wouldn't stop you, but not only did you sire another demigod with that shallow, selfish, and egotistical mortal, you also sired a Roman demigod and named him after the only hero that I liked." Hera said, though she wasn't as angry about that anymore after seeing the events of what happened to Jason, Grace and Juno being made his guardian. She also did feel somewhat guilty as her actions of having Jason brought to the wolf house lead his sister, Thalia, to run away and be hunted by monsters sent by Hades, all of which lead to her being turned into a tree. It was after telling Madara who she really was that she also revealed all things she's done, including all the suffering she caused Zeus's demigods. He had been angry since Madara had believed that children should not pay for the sins of their parents, but he was able to understand it from her point of view. That didn't mean that Hera didn't feel terrible, knowing she let her anger cloud her judgment while only caring about the chance to make Zeus suffer. "So yes, I split my being and went to the elemental nations, where I met someone who actually was able to stay loyal. And I stayed there for 12 years after giving birth to my daughter and raised her," Hera said, since the ancient laws were limited to Earth, given the gods in the elemental nations didn't have such rules against being part of their children's lives, for the rare few that do have demigods. "And if you even think of touching my daughter, you will have one less ally in your war against Poseidon," Hera threatened, since if Zeus did anything to Kyoko, she will gladly help Poseidon overthrow him. Zeus clenched his throne's armrests tightly and glared at his wife, his anger being greater than the fear he felt at her temper. "You forget what happened the last time you went against me, Hera, shall I remind you of the punishment I gave you then?" Zeus said threateningly. "I remember, but you only were able to get free after Thetis brought briars to free you, while only being able to stop us because of the Master Bolt, which you no longer have. So please, by all means, try it," Hera said, while cracking her knuckles, knowing that without the Master Bolt, Zeus wasn't at his strongest. In fact, he was actually the weakest of the big three, since his over-reliance on the Master Bolt and overall arrogance kept him from staying in shape. After him was Hades, since the increased workload from running the underworld in recent times has left him with less time to work out. All while the strongest was actually Poseidon, since his domain wasn't as taxing as Hades's, nor was he arrogant and overly reliant on his symbol of power, to where it became a crutch, like with Zeus. For several tense and silent moments, it looked the couple was going to fight until Zeus backed down, knowing he can't risk having Hera as an enemy, especially not now. It'd only encourage others to side with Poseidon. "Hera, why did you cheat on Zeus? You're the goddess of marriage. It's going against your own domain to cheat on your spouse," said Athena, the goddess of wisdom, warfare, arts and skills. Athena was a beautiful and attractive goddess who looked to be in her early 20s, with long white gray hair and violet eyes, while wearing a Grecian toga and a crown of blue flowers on her head. It confused the goddess, since not in 1,000 years could she have ever predicted Hera to cheat on Zeus and sire a demigod. Given she hadn't done so after the first dozen times, it's understandable that the goddess of wisdom believed it would never happen. Now that it has happened, she wanted to hear Hera's reasons. Hera turned to her stepdaughter, something she's recently taken to referring to all of Zeus's godly children that weren't hers. Mostly as a way to accept that, yes, it happened and that they were still her family, even if she didn't birth them. I simply grew tired that after several millennia of being cheated on, with not even an oath on the sticks being able to keep Zeus loyal to me, I simply decided not to remain loyal to a man that can't show me the same treatment. And you're right, I'm the goddess of marriage in all its aspects, which also includes adultery. Hera said, while giving Zeus a pointed glance, since that part of her domain most likely came from all the times that he cheated on her. This made Zeus look away, though only because these millennia of affairs have finally come back to bite him in the ass, rather than out of guilt or remorse. Meanwhile, most of the other Olympians were still stuck in their own little worlds from the revelation of Hera having a demigod. I don't think even I could have seen this coming. Apollo muttered with wide eyes, while not even bothering to pick up his sunglasses, which fell off his face. Hermes and surprisingly Artemis nodded in agreement with similar shocked expressions. The moon goddess was even too shocked to smack her twin for his badly timed comment, knowing it was definitely too soon for it. Knowing there was no point in continuing the meeting, Zeus stood up. This meeting is over. But now I expect both of your children to return my master bolt by the summer solstice or there will be consequences. Both for them and you too. Zeus said threateningly to Hera and Poseidon, who gave him dark looks at threatening their children. Zeus then flashed away in a bolt of lightning, leading to some of the other gods to do the same and hopefully clear their heads of what they just witnessed. Hera, though, stayed behind and looked to her sister, Hestia, who has been tending to the hearth the entire time. Hestia? Hera said, getting the petite goddess's attention. Yes, sister? Hestia asked, while having a feeling that she knew what Hera was going to ask her. Could you look after Kyoko for me, while telling her that I'm sorry for claiming her this early and give her my regards, please? Hera said with hopeful eyes. She'd do it herself, but now that she's back on Earth, she can no longer be there for her daughter in person, no matter how much she wanted to. And at the moment, the only one that Hera trusted to watch her daughter was Hestia. Perhaps Demeter as well, if she didn't think she'd drive Kyoko mad with her constant talk about cereal. She was relieved when Hestia smiled and nodded. I'd be happy to watch over my newest niece. Hestia replied, having been curious to meet Kyoko, both for all the times she gave tributes to her and when she saw her at the hearth in camp. Now learning that Kyoko is her sister's daughter only made Hestia more interested in meeting her. Smiling in thanks, Hera got up to leave. Unfortunately, she was tackled by a pink blur before she could. Looking at who it is, Hera felt the oncoming migraine when she saw Aphrodite clinging to her, with a hungry look in her eyes. Tell me everything. Aphrodite said giddily, while wanting to know everything about Hera not only having an affair, but who she had a demigod with as well. She needed to know everything. What he looked like, his personality, what drew her to him, how he treated her. She needed every single detail. Not to mention Kyoko as well, since Aphrodite needed to learn about Hera's demigod to plan out her perfect love life. We should have just stayed in the elemental nations. Hera thought with a deadpan expression, while seeing Aphrodite shake so much that it looked like she was about to explode. She mentally sighed in resignation, knowing that it's going to be a long day, if she's lucky that is. Half-blood. And that's the last of it. Kyoko thought, while putting the last of her stuff away after moving into her mother's cabin. Looking around the cabin, Kyoko couldn't help but be amazed at how different it is from how it originally looked. Originally, the cabin was just an honorary cabin for Hera since she didn't have any demigods, until Kyoko that is. Before, the inside of the cabin was completely empty with only a statue of Hera in the center and a fire pit at its feet, with no beds and being freezing cold. Now however, it was completely different since Hera had the cabin renovated to be prepared for when she claimed Kyoko. The walls were marble and shades of various colors. Such as red, navy blue, and purple, that blended together. The first thing one would see upon entering is a living area with some leather couches and chairs, a large flat-screen TV with several different game consoles hooked up, a kitchen area that was fully stocked, a statue of her mother in an alcove in the far wall opposite to the door, and a door that led to a bedroom. The bedroom had a massive bed with a canopy that had the design of a peacock's plumage, a desk, some empty bookshelves that she filled with her manga and anime, a display case which Kyoko guessed was for any trophy she gets from the monsters she defeats, a walk-in closet that already contained several different styles of clothes in her size, and a bathroom. The bathroom had a walk-in shower, a large bathtub, and even a hot tub. Kyoko had felt her mom might have gone overboard with designing the cabin, that is until she saw the note that she left for her on her desk. Nothing but the best for my little girl. Kyoko merely laughed before getting all her stuff settled inside. Now she was finished and felt like getting some sleep, but first, she had to create a clone to finish the scroll she had been working on. Though when she entered her room, she stopped when she saw a familiar loli spread out on her bed. "This is really comfortable, like laying on a cloud," Hestia said before sitting up and smiling at her niece. "Hello Kyoko," greeted Hestia. "Hello Aunt Hestia." Kyoko returned with a smile, though was surprised at seeing the goddess here. "Your mother sent me, she wanted me to tell you that she's sorry for claiming you this early and that she sends her regards and love," Hestia said upon seeing the questioning look in her niece's eyes. "It's fine and tell her there's nothing to be sorry for, I know she wouldn't something like this without a good enough reason. And thank you," Kyoko said, happy that her mother sent Hestia to check on her rather than a different goddess. Though she couldn't deny that a part of her was happy that her mother claimed her this early to officially be recognized as her mother's daughter. Hestia was surprised since it's rare for demigods to ever truly understand the reasons behind why their godly parents do the things they do. But it also made her happy that Kyoko and Hera have such a close bond with each other, it was just a shame that not all demigods could say the same about their godly parents. "So, can you please tell me about yourself?" Hestia asked while sitting up onto the edge of the bed and patting the spot next to her, eager to get to know her niece. Nodding, Kyoko sat down next to Hestia and began telling the goddess about herself, along with her time in the elemental nations with her parents. It warmed the petite goddess's heart to hear how fondly Kyoko talk about her parents. It also helped her understand why Hera has been so much happier lately, happier than Hestia has seen her in thousands of years. However, while they were talking, Hestia did take notice of how Kyoko's eyes were subtly looking at her body. Hestia wasn't mad though, rather she saw a moment to tease her niece. "You know, you don't have to be subtle, I won't be mad if you openly look at me," Hestia teased, with Kyoko blushing brightly at being caught. I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't mean to look." Kyoko stuttered in embarrassment, with her social awkwardness fully coming out at being caught by the girl she was checking out, who also happened to be her aunt. There was a reason why Kyoko usually kept to herself and didn't really interact with anyone aside from family, friends, and those she was comfortable around. As well as in interactive activities, where she had no choice. Given she only ever interacted with her parents back when she lived in the elemental nations, along with the fact that she hasn't been on Earth that long to really understand how things work here. It didn't help that in all the Greek myths she's been told, no one batted an eye to a god taking a male mortal as a lover, but she never found one where a goddess took a female mortal as a lover. The other campers had been amazed at her skills, and now they'll likely be afraid of her, but Kyoko didn't want them to see her differently because of her feelings. Even if she's been taught to not care about how others saw her, she still had some friends at camp and didn't want to lose them. Plus, there was also the worry and fear of how her mother would react as well. Hestia just smiled before hugging Kyoko from behind, with the Uchiha's face burning a bright red at feeling the goddess's breasts being pressed against her back. "It's fine, I may be a virgin goddess, but I'm not offended or angry. You're 12 and at the age where you're starting to enter puberty, so such reactions are understandable. And I'll admit, this outfit and form aren't exactly the most modest," Hestia admitted sheepishly. Honestly, she had started taking this form after hearing Apollo talking to Artemis, who simply ignored him, about Japanese entertainment. One of which being an anime and manga. Hestia had gotten curious about it, especially when he mentioned that even some of the gods and past heroes were depicted in some. Hestia had come across one such depiction of her in an anime and had started using this form, mostly because she thought it was really cute and never really thought of what reactions this form would get. "And you don't have to worry, I won't judge you for who you love or wish to be with. And I'm sure your mother won't either," Hestia said reassuringly, having sensed how strong the familial love that Hera had for Kyoko was, and Hestia was sure that nothing could ever happen to make Hera stop loving her daughter. That helped ease Kyoko's nerves and managed to look at Hestia with a smile. "Thank you Aunt Hestia," Kyoko said, with Hestia nodding before standing up. "You're welcome. Also, aside from when you're out on quests, since we can't interfere with those, I'll be dropping in every now and then to see how you're doing. But for now, I have to go, so until next time, see ya," Hestia said before vanishing while leaving behind the scent of cinnamon and baked goods. Kyoko smiled widely, happy that she'll get to see her aunt more often. Though soon her excitement wore off, leaving her exhausted and she immediately fell onto her bed and went to sleep. Next morning. Percy gulped as he stood in front of cabin 2, Hera's cabin. While he knew Kyoko said to meet her in her cabin, Percy really didn't want to risk angering Hera, and while Percy had only recently started learning about the different gods and goddesses, he knew that Hera didn't like demigods in general, since they went against her domain of marriage. Add in the fact that she was also likely very protective of Kyoko, especially since she's her first demigod, Percy really didn't want to find out what punishment Hera could give him if she saw him as a threat to her daughter. He also saw that the other campers, well the ones that were already awake, were looking at him like they did last night. Not scared like they had been when Kyoko was claimed, but more along the lines of being wary and just avoiding him. It didn't help that he was now staying cabin 3, his father's cabin, and was completely alone in there. Well, here goes nothing. Lady Hera, please allow me to enter your cabin, please. Percy thought while readying himself for kind of punishment. Thankfully though, nothing happened to him and instead the cabin doors swung open, causing Percy to release the breath he didn't even realize he was holding. Walking up to the cabin, Percy entered it slowly, still aware of the eyes on him and not wanting to go in too quickly in case the goddess suddenly changed her mind. Though to his relief, nothing happened the moment he stepped into the surprisingly well-decorated cabin. Looks more like a home than a cabin. Percy thought in amazement at how different it looked compared to the Hermes and Poseidon cabins. Looking around for Kyoko, Percy didn't find her in the main area and figured she must be in her room. Going over to the door Percy knocked, not wanting to anger both Kyoko and her mother by just barging in and waited for a response. "It's open," came her response. Opening the door, the first thing Percy noticed was the numerous anime, manga, video games and figurines on the shelves. While Kyoko was currently lying on her bed, reading a volume of Bleach before lowering it and waving at Percy. "Yo, what's down?" Kyoko said, causing Percy to blink in confusion. "What's down? Don't you mean what's up?" Percy asked, with Kyoko looking away embarrassed. Yeah, that, sorry," muttered Kyoko, since she was still learning about slang. Percy just blinked again at seeing this new side of Kyoko, given it's definitely a contrast to the girl who's considered the strongest demigod at camp. It actually gave Percy a new light to just how his cousin acts when not around others. "So, what did you want to see me about?" Percy asked, deciding to save her from embarrassing herself any further. In response, Kyoko pulled out a scroll and tossed it at the son of Poseidon, who managed to catch it thanks to his ADHD reflexes. Opening it, Percy was surprised when he saw it contained different water techniques and a few quake-based techniques. There were also a few exercises on how to better control water. "What are these for?" Percy asked as Kyoko got up and walked over to her shelves of manga. "They're techniques I'm going to help you learn. You're a demigod of one of the big 3, so you'll need as much help as you can get, both to control your powers and get stronger. Especially, given that you were born after the 3 made a vow to not have any more demigod children. Here are these 2. Kyoko said, while handing him a couple one-piece volumes that mainly feature Whitebeard and his Gurgura no Mi powers. Given that 2 of Poseidon's titles are the Earthshaker and the Stormbringer, she figured that Percy would have some control over the earth, weather and quakes. Which would make it possible for him to replicate Whitebeard's devil fruit powers. Percy just looked at her blankly, wondering how manga could help him. "Don't give me that look, a lot of stuff in anime and manga are really useful since they can be replicated depending on what powers a demigod inherits from their parents. I figured you'd be able to replicate Whitebeard's quake moves. Though I doubt you'll ever be able to be as cool or as strong as him, since he was able to survive for a few minutes after having a hole in his chest and give the biggest middle finger to the world government. And Ace is so badass and the coolest big brother in the series, I'm currently trying to replicate his firefly attack, but I'm having trouble with keeping the lights from exploding before I want them to. Also, I still can't believe they were killed off and that bastard Blackbeard gets to live, no one even likes him and he stole Whitebeard's devil fruit. I swear if he was real, I'd shove my foot so far up his." Percy's sweat dropped when she started ranting about how cool Whitebeard and Ace were, which only increased when she started listing all things she'd do to Blackbeard if he was real, some of which he didn't think were physically possible. Seeing that things were getting off track, Percy has cleared throat, causing Kyoko to stop her ranting and look away in embarrassment. "Sorry," Kyoko muttered while scratching her head sheepishly. Shaking his head in good nature, Percy opened one of the mangas, which was thankfully translated to Latin, and he had to admit it would be pretty cool to replicate some of the attacks Whitebeard could do. Though he did have to agree with Kyoko, he doubted he'd ever be strong enough to destroy the world with these attacks. "What about these water techniques, where'd these come from?" Percy asked. "They're techniques my father taught me. I'm not actually from this realm, I'm from one called the Elemental Nations," Kyoko revealed, given it's pretty much an open secret that she wasn't from Earth, but no one knew exactly where she's from. To prove her point, Kyoko created a shadow clone and activated her Sharingan, much to Percy's shock. "This is getting weird, even by demigod standards," Percy muttered, since after learning he was a demigod and the Greek gods were real, he was willing to believe a lot of things. But seeing Kyoko create a clone of herself and then her eyes turn red with 3 tomos spinning around the pupil, it made Percy wonder just how much he didn't know. "Maybe, but normal is overrated," Kyoko said while chuckling sheepishly, knowing he was right and that by normal demigod standards, she's definitely unique. After that, they worked out a training schedule for Percy to learn the water and quake techniques, Kyoko saying it'd be good to have some unexpected tricks up his sleeves, along with tell him of where she trains in the forest in secret. Once that was done, both of the grandchildren of Kronos bid farewell, all while wondering what was in store for them with the reveal of who their parents are. A week has passed since Percy was claimed by his father, Poseidon, and Kyoko was officially claimed by her mother, Hera. Since then, most of the camp had begun avoiding them. Kyoko more so than Percy, given they were still fearful of a lightning bolt shooting down and vaporizing her, and them by extension of being anywhere near her. Kyoko had also begun helping Percy master the powers he's inherited from his father. The one he's gotten the best at was water manipulation, especially after their first lesson when Kyoko showed just how powerful the element of water could be. Flashback. Why are we in the woods? And why did we have to get up so earlier? Percy asked, while glaring at Kyoko in annoyance. The reason is that it was currently 6 in the morning with Apollo's chariot just starting to rise. Percy had been sleeping until Kyoko had started banging on his cabin door and shouting at him to get up. He had been tempted to simply ignore her and go back to sleep, that is until she threatened to drag him out and throw him to the harpies. Well, despite it being an unsaid rule that you don't enter another cabin unless you were invited in, Percy doubted that would stop Kyoko from carrying out her threat. So, with great reluctances, Percy got up and got dressed before exiting his cabin and followed Kyoko into the woods without her giving a reason why. Simple, we're going to work on your water manipulation, stated Kyoko before placing her hand on the ground and created a wooden stick which she picked up while Percy looked at her in confusion. Then, wouldn't it be better to do this by the beach or lake? Percy asked since they weren't anywhere near water. No, it's better here, since you're a child of one of the big three, which means that monsters will be more drawn to you, given how strong your scent is. You'll have to be ready at all times for an attack when you aren't at camp, and there will be times when you won't have easy access to water, which brings us to our first lessons, sensing and locating water. Kyoko said, with Percy giving her a deadpan look in response. I don't think I need help locating water. Ow. Percy winced when Kyoko smacked him with the stick. Don't interrupt. Kyoko said, while pointing the stick at him threateningly, before she started drawing kanji on the ground, along with an ancient Greek translation under each of them. Now then, before you can try and manipulate water, you have to know the basic principles of it. When I first started my training, my father taught me there are 5 main elements used in jutsu. Fire, wind, lightning, earth, and water. There are also sub-elements, like my wood style, that combine 2 or more of the main elements together. In the case of wood style, it's water and earth. Most ninja can only use 1 or 2 elements, but powerful ones, like my father, can use all 5. Though while the elements are strong individually, they're also weak to each other. Fire beats wind, wind beats lightning, lightning beats earth, earth beats water, and water beats fire. Certain elements can also be combined to become more powerful. For example, combing wind and fire will increase the fire's power. You still following? Kyoko said, while looking at Percy, who nodded slowly, though not sure what all this had to do with him learning to control water. It also kind of reminded him of the Avatar series, with all the talk of the elements. Alright, now learning to use the elements is difficult and requires weeks, if not months or years, of training in order to successfully transform your chakra into elemental chakra. Luckily, you don't need to do that, given you don't have chakra and simply do it instinctively. But you also limit yourself in that you need to be near a water source to use your powers. Kyoko said. How exactly is that a limit? Percy questioned. One of the strongest water jutsu users in my world could create water from the air while being in the middle of a desert, stated Kyoko, shocking Percy. While Madara hated Tobirama Senju for killing his last living brother, he also knew the man had unrivaled control over water. Percy, there is water everywhere around you, in the air, in the ground, plants, even inside people. You simply need to be able to feel it and learn to use it. Do that, and you'll always have a weapon, no matter where you are. Kyoko said. Then flashback. After that, she had begun teaching Percy to sense and feel the water around him in the air and the ground. When he was able to do that, she began teaching him to pull water out of them. The demigod showed to be a natural, as it wasn't long until he could pull large amounts of water from the air and ground. After that, she had Percy work on manipulating it into different shapes to gain better control over it. She also got him started on controlling the temperature of the water to make it either boil or freeze. Unfortunately, while he showed to be a natural at controlling water, the same couldn't be said for quake manipulation. At most Percy could cause small, barely noticeable, tremors. Before accidentally causing a large one that scared a good portion of the camp at the sudden quake. After that, they agreed the quake manipulation was too advanced for him at the moment and decided to focus on what he could do. For Kyoko, it also felt nice training someone, along with getting to better know her cousin. Currently, Kyoko was in her cabin watching Hellsing Ultimate. I wonder if vampires are real. Kyoko thought. She knew about Impausa in Greek and Roman mythology that are one of the bases for modern-day vampires. But Kyoko always wondered what else was real or if any of the other pantheons exist. After all, if the Greek pantheon is real, then what about other gods or other supernatural aspects? This is what Kyoko really wanted to find out during the times she leaves camp to see what else is real but only passed off as myths. Pushing those thoughts aside for now, Kyoko focused back on the show, specifically Alucard's dual guns, Castle and Jackal. Wonder if I could get the Hephaestus cabin to build guns like Castle and Jackal, or maybe Ebony and Ivory from Devil May Cry. Maybe Blue Rose and Red Queen too. Kyoko wondered, having dozens of ideas for weapons and armor from various anime and video games. She was thankfully still on good terms with Charles and a few other children of Hephaestus, despite being Hera's daughter. Which was good, as she asked Charles for help building a special project before she was claimed, and he had informed her yesterday that they were almost ready. Kyoko was pulled from her thoughts when she heard a knocking on her bedroom door. Going over, Kyoko opened it and saw Annabeth standing there. "Yeah?" Kyoko asked, wondering why Annabeth was here, given they didn't have a lesson today. "Tyron and Mr. D want to see you and Percy at the big house. Grover's already getting Percy and I was sent to get you," Annabeth said, with Kyoko tilting her head, confused as to why they were needed. Nodding, Kyoko exited her cabin and followed Annabeth to the big house. Looking up at the sky, Kyoko saw dark gray storm clouds overhead. It looked like a storm was brewing, even worse than the one when Percy and Grover showed up at camp. "So, wanna tell me what exactly your problem with Percy is?" Kyoko asked, having noticed that ever since the claiming, Annabeth has gotten more annoyed with Percy than usual and would hear her muttering to herself. "It's simply the way things are, our parents have been rivals ever since my mom was made the patron deity of Athens and Poseidon brought his girlfriend into my mom's temple," Annabeth stated, as if that explained everything, with Kyoko scoffing at her words. Both at how childish it was and because she knew what really happened with Medusa. The priestess of Athena who Poseidon tried seducing, and when that failed, he raped her in Athena's temple. And rather than comforting her priestess, Athena turned her into a monster. And because of that, Percy should pay for his father's sins. "How wise of you, Annabeth," Kyoko said sarcastically, with Annabeth blushing in embarrassment, since hearing Kyoko say it like that did make it seem childish. "If you don't want to get along with Percy, then fine, don't. But don't let it be because of some rivalry between your parents. Especially since it happened thousands of years ago," Kyoko said. "If the demigods judged each other for the crimes their parents committed against each other, then they'd all be at each other's throats." "Fine, I get it. I'll make my own opinion of the seaweed brain," Annabeth conceded, seeing Kyoko's points. "There's hope for you yet, Annie," Kyoko cooed while petting Annabeth's head, with the daughter of Athena swatting her hand away. "Don't call me Annie and don't pet me, or I swear I'll take away your anime," Annabeth threatened. "You wouldn't dare," Kyoko hissed. "Oh, I dare," said Annabeth gravely. After a few moments of the two staring each other down, Kyoko crossed her arms and pouted as they continued towards the big house. They soon arrived, with Kyoko seeing Percy and Grover were already present. Well, here's our other little celebrity," Mr. D said, without looking up from his cards. "Nice to see you too, Donna," Kyoko retorted, with Mr. D looking up briefly to give her a scathing look. "HMPH, well, don't expect me to kowtow to you two, mortals, just because old Barnacle Beard is your father or that the preening peacock is your mother," Mr. D said. A net of lightning flashed across the clouds. Thunder shook the windows of the house. "Blah, blah, blah," said Mr. D, not at all intimidated. Tyron feigned interest in his pinochle cards. While Grover cowered by the railing, his hooves clopping back and forth. "If I had my way, I would cause your molecules to erupt in flames. Sweep up the ashes and be done with a lot of trouble. But Chiron seems to feel this would be against my mission at this cursed camp. To keep you little brat safe from harm," Mr. D said, while looking like he was considering doing just that. "Spontaneous combustion is a form of harm," Mr. D Chiron chided. "Nonsense," Mr. D said, looking at Kyoko and Percy with glowing purple eyes. "The brats wouldn't feel a thing. Nevertheless, I've agreed to restrain myself. I'm thinking of turning you into a dolphin and a peacock before sending you back to your parents," Mr. D Chiron warned. "Oh, alright, there's one more option. But it's deadly foolish," Mr. D stated, standing up as the playing cards dropped. "I'm off to Olympus for the emergency meeting. If the boy and girl are still here when I get back, I'll turn him into an Atlantic botanist and her into a peacock or maybe a cow. Do you understand? And Perseus Jackson, Kyoko Uchiha, if you're at all smart, you'll see that's a much more sensible choice than what Chiron feels you must do," Mr. D said. Dionysus picked up a playing card, twisted it, and it became a plastic rectangle. A credit card. No. A security pass. He snapped his fingers, and the air seemed to fold and bend around him. He became a hologram, then a gust of wind, then he was gone, leaving only the smell of fresh pressed grapes lingering behind. "Sit, Percy, Kyoko please. And Grover." Chiron said smiling, while laying his cards on the table, showing it was a winning hand. "Tell me you two, what did you think of the hellhounds?" Chiron asked. Kyoko noticed Percy shiver at the mention of the monsters. "It scared me, if you hadn't shot it, and if Kyoko hadn't killed the second one, I'd be dead," Percy admitted, with Kyoko shrugging. "Nah, they were overgrown mutts," Kyoko said, having seen and killed scarier things than hellhounds in the elemental nations. "Well, you'll both meet worse. Far worse, before you're done," Chiron said lowly. "Done with what?" Percy asked. "You're sending us on a quest," guessed Kyoko, with Chiron nodding in confirmation. "Yes. Will you both accept?" Chiron asked, while looking between the two. "But you haven't told us what it is, sir," stated Percy, since he didn't even know what the goal of the quest would be. "Well, that's the hard part, the details," Chiron said slowly with a grimace. Thunder rumbled across the valley. The storm clouds had now reached the edge of the beach. As far as they could see, the sky and the sea were boiling together. That's when it clicked for Kyoko. Why her mother claimed her, why Poseidon claimed Percy, and why it seemed like the sea and the sky looked ready to tear each other apart. Something was stolen, a weapon, wasn't it? That's why they're fighting, Kyoko stated, with Percy nodding in agreement, having come to the same conclusion. "How did you two know that?" Chiron asked. "The weather since Christmas has been weird, like the sea and the sky are fighting. Then I talked to Annabeth and she'd overheard something about a theft. And I've also been having these dreams," Percy admitted. "I knew it," Grover said excitedly. "Hush Satyr," ordered Chiron. "But it is their quest. It has to be," said Grover. "Only the Oracle can determine it," Chiron reminded, while stroking his beard. "Nevertheless, you're both correct. Your father, Percy, and Zeus are having their worst quarrel in centuries. They are fighting over something valuable that was stolen. To be precise. A lightning bolt," Chiron revealed. "The what?" Percy asked with a nervous laugh, though no one else laughed. "The lightning bolt, Percy, the lightning bolt. Our dear uncle's symbol of power, rivaled only by your father's trident and Hades' helm of darkness. Their weapons created when they first overthrew the Titans, forged by the Cyclops, bronze, to be even more powerful than our grandfather's side," Kyoko said, with Chiron nodding gravely. "She's right, Percy. I'm not talking about some tinfoil-covered zigzag that you'd see in a second-grade play. I'm talking about a 2-foot-long cylinder of high-grade celestial bronze, capped on both ends with god-level explosives," said Chiron. "Oh," Percy muttered with wide eyes. "Zeus's master bolt, the symbol of his power, from which all other lightning bolts are patterned. The first weapon made by the Cyclops for the war against the Titans, the bolt that sheared the top off Mount Etna and hurled Kronos from his throne. The master bolt, which packs enough power to make mortal hydrogen bombs look like firecrackers," said Chiron gravely, knowing in the wrong hands the master bolt could bring untold amounts of destruction. "And it's missing?" Percy asked. "Stolen actually," said Kyoko. "By who?" questioned Percy. "By whom?" Chiron corrected out of habit before pointing to them. "By you two." Percy's mouth fell open, while Kyoko scoffed at the accusation. "At least, that's what Zeus thinks. During the winter solstice, at the last council of the gods, Zeus and Poseidon had an argument. The usual nonsense. Mother Ray always liked you best, air disasters are more spectacular than sea disasters, etc. Afterwards, Zeus realized his master bolt was missing, taken from the throne room under his very nose. He immediately blamed Poseidon. Now, a god cannot usurp another god's symbol of power directly, that is forbidden by the most ancient of divine laws. But Zeus believes your father convinced a human hero to take it. But I didn't. Patience and listen, child. Zeus has good reason to be suspicious. The forges of the Cyclops are under the ocean, which gives Poseidon some influence over the makers of his brother's lightning. Zeus believes Poseidon has taken the master bolt and is now secretly having the Cyclops build an arsenal of illegal copies, which might be used to topple Zeus from his throne. The only thing Zeus wasn't sure about was which hero Poseidon used to steal the bolt. Now Poseidon has openly claimed you as his son. You were in New York over the winter holidays. You could easily have snuck into Olympus. So, Zeus believes he has found his thief," Chiron said. "And what about me? I wasn't even in this dimension," Kyoko said, with Chiron clearing his throat, seeing her point, but he doubts Zeus would. "Yes, well, given the fact you are the child of his wife, something that has never happened before, along with Hera's part in the first Olympian riot where she helped imprison Zeus. It isn't that hard to believe he blames you as well, especially given you are from the elemental nations. Chiron said, with Kyoko making a TSK sound. But I've never even been to Olympus. Zeus is crazy. Percy said, given he hasn't even known about all this for even a month yet. Chiron and Grover glanced nervously at the sky. The clouds didn't seem to be parting around them, as Grover had promised. They were rolling straight over the valley, sealing them in like a coffin lid. Percy, we don't use the C word to describe the Lord of the Sky. Grover said nervously. Yeah, how about egotistical, power-hungry, arrogant, hypocritical, and a giant prick? Kyoko listed mentally. Perhaps paranoid, then again, Poseidon has tried to unseat Zeus before. I believe that was question 38 on your final exam. Chiron trailed off looking at Percy, as if expecting him to remember the answer. Something about a golden net. Poseidon and Hera and a few other gods trapped Zeus and wouldn't let him out until he promised to be a better ruler, right? Percy guessed. That's the one good thing Kyoko admired about the ones who stood against Zeus and tried getting him to be a better ruler. The only problem was that they didn't leave him in a more secure location where no one could free him, and afterwards, they just spent all their time arguing with each other. Correct, and Zeus has never trusted Poseidon since, and after you're claiming Kyoko, he has even less reason to trust Poseidon or Hera. Of course, Poseidon denies stealing the Master Bolt. He took great offense at the accusation. The two have been arguing back and forth for months, threatening war. And now, you both have come along the proverbial last straw. Said Chiron. But I'm just a kid without any training at the time this happened. Percy argued, since he would have had to be very sneaky to somehow get into Olympus without anyone noticing. He'd be lucky to sneak up on a deaf person. Percy, if you were Zeus and you already thought your brother was plotting to overthrow you, then your brother suddenly admitted he had broken the sacred oath he took after World War II. That he's fathered a new mortal hero who might be used as a weapon against you, and not only that, but to learn your wife also cheated you and sired a demigod. Wouldn't that put a twist in your toga? Grover asked, with Kyoko finally having enough. Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. Kyoko said, standing up and silencing everyone with a glare. You say Zeus is throwing a hissy fit because Poseidon broke the oath, well that just makes him a giant hypocrite, because correct if I'm wrong, but isn't that right there proof that he broke the oath first? Kyoko said, pointing to the pine tree at the camp's border, the same one that Zeus turned his daughter Thalia into. Grover and Annabeth both flinched at the mention of their friend. As for my mom cheating on him, one time I might add, that makes him an even bigger hypocrite. As how many times did he cheat on her? How many demigods did he sire? If anything, they have every right to be pissed off and want him gone. Kyoko said angrily, with her Mangekyo Sharingan activating unconsciously. She refused to have the poster boy for hypocrisy be defended when he has given her mother and Poseidon 1,000 reasons to want to see him dethroned. Kyoko. Enough. Chiron said loudly, surprising Percy, Annabeth and Grover, given they've never seen Chiron shout. After a few minutes, Kyoko sat down with her arms crossed. Poseidon, my dad, he didn't really have the Master Bolt stolen, did he? Percy asked, with Chiron sighing, while rubbing his forehead. Most thinking observers would agree that thievery is not Poseidon's style. But the sea god is too proud to try convincing Zeus of that. Zeus has demanded that Poseidon return the bolt by the summer solstice. That's June 21st, 10 days from now. Poseidon wants an apology for being called a thief by the same date. I hope that diplomacy might prevail, that Hera, Demeter or Hestia would make the two brothers see sense. But your rival has inflamed Zeus's temper. Now neither god will back down. Unless someone intervenes, unless the Master Bolt is found and returned to Zeus before the solstice, there will be war. And do you know what a full-fledged war would look like, Percy? Chiron asked. Bad? Guessed Percy. Imagine the world in chaos. Nature at war with itself. Olympians forced to choose sides between Zeus and Poseidon. Destruction. Carnage. Millions dead. Western civilization turned into a battleground so big it will make the Trojan War look like a water balloon fight. Bad. Percy repeated. And you, Percy Jackson and Kyoko Echidna, would be the first to feel Zeus's wrath. Chiron said gravely. Like our parents would let that happen. Kyoko thought, given Hera and Poseidon were still at full strength, while Zeus's power was greatly diminished without his weapon. It started to rain. Volleyball players stopped their game and stared in stunned silence at the sky. So, we have to find the stupid bolt and return it to Zeus. Percy said angrily. What better peace offering than to have the son of Poseidon and daughter of Hera return Zeus's property? Asked Chiron. Yeah, and then turn us to ash as a thank you. Kyoko muttered sarcastically. If Poseidon doesn't have it, where is the thing? Percy asked. I believe I know. Part of a prophecy I had years ago. Well, some of the lines make sense to me now. But before I can say more, you must officially take up the quest. you must seek the counsel of the oracle. Chiron said grimly. Why can't you tell us where the bolt is beforehand? Percy asked, annoyed that everything had to be riddle and just wished for a straight answer. Because if I did, you would be too afraid to accept the challenge. Chiron stated. We're already marked for death if we don't return his precious toy, what would it matter if we're afraid? Retorted Kyoko. You agree then? Questioned Chiron. Percy looked at Grover, who nodded encouragingly. Easy for him, he's not the one at risk of being killed by Zeus. Alright, better than being turned into animals. Percy said. I'll go, but only so I can hopefully fight some strong monsters. Added Kyoko. Then it's time you consulted the oracle. Go upstairs, you two, to the attic. When you come back down, assuming you're still sane, we will talk more. Said Chiron. Gee, thanks for the vote of confidence. Kyoko said sarcastically, with a deadpan expression. Getting up, the two demigods entered the big house with Percy looking at Kyoko. Hey, what was that from before and pointing at the pine tree? Percy asked, not knowing about Thalia. It's not really my place to tell. But that pine tree, it powers the barrier that surrounds the camp and keeps the monsters out. It also wasn't always a pine tree, her name is Thalia Grace, daughter of Zeus, our cousin. Kyoko revealed, with Percy looking at her in shock that Zeus also broke the oath of the big three, though something Kyoko said caught his attention. But, if she's that tree, then isn't she, you know, Percy said nervously, not wanting to actually say it, with Kyoko chuckling lightly. She's not dead, she's just trapped in the tree. Think of it like limbo, you're not dead, but you're not alive either, you're just stuck. Kyoko said, while frowning at the end, with Percy nodding slowly as they ascended the stairs, still confused about one thing. How do you know that? Percy asked. Kyoko smirked as she remembered how she discovered that during her second month at camp. Flashback. I swear, Annabeth must be a legacy of Deimos or Phobos. Kyoko thought with a haunted look in her eyes. She had just left the infirmary after having a couple of Apollo's kids heal her mind of that horror Annabeth made her watch with her Sharingan. Kyoko didn't think it'd be a problem, using her Sharingan to better memorize all the lessons to help speed them up and get back to training. Obviously, Annabeth didn't have the same opinion given what she forced Kyoko to watch afterwards, tricking her into believing it was part of her lesson. The moment it started, Kyoko hadn't been able to look away or turn off her Sharingan, it was like watching a train crash, it was so horrible to watch, but you just couldn't look away. After it finally ended, Kyoko was sure she blacked out and woke up in the infirmary with her mind being healed by some of Apollo's kids. The terrifying part was Annabeth had just been standing in the corner, watching with a blank expression, but Kyoko swore she saw a gleam in her eyes. Kyoko swore she wouldn't ever use her Sharingan during her lessons with Annabeth again, she didn't need to be scarred anymore than she already was. Exiting the big house, Kyoko soon found her way to the large pine tree on Half-Blood Hill by the camp entrance. Looking at the tree, Kyoko brushed her palm against it. What are you? Kyoko wondered. Ever since her father implanted Hashirama's cells into her, Kyoko had gained a strong connection to nature and even stronger sensing abilities. She could sense every form of plant life, from blades of grass to trees. She also found out that if she channeled her chakra into plants, she could make them healthier and live longer, along with healing them. After coming to Earth and entering Camp Half-Blood, she had managed to get a feel for dryads, allowing her to feel where the dryads were and what trees housed them. It was interesting, being able to feel living creatures within the trees. But this one, when she had first entered camp and saw it, she had felt there was something different about it, it felt like the tree itself was alive. Kyoko knew the tree was connected to the barrier that kept monsters out of camp, but that was it. She had tried asking some of the other campers, but they clamped up and made some excuse to get away. It only made Kyoko more curious of just what this tree was. Sitting against the tree, Kyoko closed her eyes, hoping to get a better idea of figuring out what, or perhaps who, this tree is. Limbo. Opening her eyes, Kyoko blinked in confusion when she saw she was still in camp, only everything seemed empty. Standing up, Kyoko looked around and frowned when she didn't see anyone or hear anything, not even the wind. I can't sense anything either. Kyoko thought. Suddenly, Kyoko heard a banging sound coming from one of the cabins. Curious of who else could be here, Kyoko followed the sound that grew louder the closer she got, finally pinpointing the sound as coming from cabin 1, Zeus's cabin. Normally, Kyoko wouldn't risk entering another god's cabin, especially her stepfather's, as there's no doubt she'd be turned to ash before she could even put a foot through the doorway. But after thinking about it, she came to a conclusion of where she was, it was likely she's in some form of limbo within the tree and had nothing to worry about entering the cabins. Kyoko was immediately pulled from her thoughts when she heard a loud crash in the cabin, making her jump slightly. Okay, not sure if whoever or whatever is in there is friendly. Really wish I had my weapons. Kyoko thought, since she didn't feel any of her weapon pouches or her weapon scrolls on her. Taking a deep breath, Kyoko stepped forward and pushed open the large bronze doors, not sure what to expect but ready for a fight. Though who she saw wasn't what Kyoko expected. It was a girl her age, perhaps a year or two older, spiky black hair went down to just above her shoulders, a spray of freckles across her nose and cheeks, electric blue eyes, and wearing punk-style clothing. She is, oh wow. Kyoko thought, while blushing lightly at seeing the very pretty girl. The girl looked at her in shock and hope. Kyoko wasn't sure if she read the latter emotion right, but after thinking about it, Kyoko guessed she's been here a long time and believed she was here to help her. Kyoko also found the source of the loud crash when she saw the 10-foot-tall statue of Zeus had been tipped over. Who are you? The girl asked, her voice sounding a little scratchy and hoarse, though it also sounded soft, which made her look more beautiful to Kyoko. My name's Kyoko Echidna. Who are you? Kyoko asked, wanting to know who this was and whose demigod she was. Thalia Grace, daughter of Zeus. Introduced Thalia while scowling, with Kyoko's eyes widening at hearing that. Oh shit. Kyoko thought, since if that's true, then that means Zeus broke the oath of the big three. That'd also explain why her mother had gone to the elemental nations. Kyoko hadn't been told the full details, only that she wanted to give her husband a taste of his own medicine. How long have you been here? Kyoko asked, with Thalia looking like she was thinking it over for a few moments before shrugging. Who knows, a couple years maybe, 3 or 4 is my best guess. Said Thalia, since she didn't really have a way to tell time here. What about you, whose kid are you? Thalia questioned, while mentally scolding herself for the stutter. Though it was understandable, given how long it's been since she had any human contact, but during her time on the run after leaving home, she learned quickly not to show any weakness. It was only after meeting Luke, Annabeth and Grover she started letting her guard down, if only a little since she still kept herself guarded. Don't know, only that it's my mom and she brought me here after my dad passed away. Kyoko said, while sitting down next to Thalia, prompting her to do the same. She didn't tell Thalia that her mother was Hera, given the fact her mother didn't have the best track record when it came to Zeus's affairs and illegitimate children. Anyway, I came here after sensing something strange about the pine tree, next thing I knew I ended up here. Now seeing that you're stuck here by yourself, I could come here every now and then to keep you company. Kyoko said, while smiling at Thalia, who returned the smile. Yeah, I'd really like that. Replied Thalia, thankful and relieved at finally having someone to talk to, besides herself and shouting at her father's statue. She couldn't even leave the camp's border and was limited to just exploring the cabins. Honestly, the worst part isn't even the part of her being trapped in a tree, it was the sheer loneliness and silence that drove her crazy. Now she finally had someone to talk to and learn about what's happened. By the way, have you met any campers named Annabeth and Luke or a satyr named Grover? Thalia asked, wanting to know if her friends managed to reach camp safely. I've met both Luke and Annabeth, haven't seen or heard of anyone named Grover though he's probably on an assignment from Chiron. Kyoko said, making Thalia feel relieved that her friends were at camp and her sacrifice wasn't in vain. That's good. How are they? Asked Thalia, wanting to know how they have been since she was turned into a tree. They're good from what I've seen. Luke is the Hermes cabin's counselor and Annabeth is the counselor for the Athena cabin. I'm also pretty sure she's secretly a sadist. Kyoko said, with Thalia giving her a disbelieving look, doubting that Annabeth could have a mean bone in her. Seeing her look, Kyoko sighed and told Thalia exactly what Annabeth made her watch after she tried cheating on her history lessons. After hearing it, Thalia's expression turned to one of shock and horror. I don't know whether to be proud or terrified. Muttered Thalia, having a hard time believing the plucky 7-year-old she remembered could do something so evil. So, how exactly did you get stuck here? Kyoko asked, changing the subject to a less scarring one. Shrugging, Thalia told Kyoko of how she ran away from home and met Annabeth, Luke and Grover, everything they had been through together, being chased by monsters sent by Hades in retaliation for Zeus breaking the oath, and how she sacrificed herself so her friends could escape, but before she died, her father turned her into a tree to save her, and now she's stuck here in limbo. Kyoko in turn told Thalia of how she was born in another world, about chakra and her training with her father and her mother bringing her here, even activating her Sharingan to prove it. Wow, hard to believe there are other worlds. Thalia said, since even knowing the gods are real along with all the legends and myths about them, to meet a demigod from another world was shocking and awe-inspiring. Echidna chuckled at her expression, making Thalia gain an embarrassed blush. Punching Kyoko in the arm only made the ninja laugh louder, with Thalia glaring at her with a red face. It didn't really affect Kyoko, plus she thought it made Thalia look cute. Well, I should probably be going, the others might come looking for me if I'm gone too long. Kyoko said while standing up, with Thalia nodding sadly, since she had finally gotten someone to talk to, and now they're leaving. Hey, don't worry. I'd said I'll come back and I will. assured Kyoko, with Thalia nodding with a small smile. "I'd like that," Thalia replied, while Kyoko's body started vanishing. Before she fully vanished, Thalia leaned forward and hugged her before quickly letting go. Kyoko was surprised by the gesture before she fully vanished. "See you later, Kyoko," Thalia said, while smiling. Real world. Opening her eyes, Kyoko found herself back in the real camp before she stood up and smiled at Thalia's tree. "See you next time, Thalia," said Kyoko. Then flashback. Since that day, Kyoko always made time to visit Thalia every day, usually at night, where she didn't have to worry about anyone disturbing her. Kyoko had also taken to infusing Thalia's tree with her chakra, both to keep it healthy and see if it'll eventually free Thalia from the tree, at least until Kyoko can find a much more sure way to free Thalia. After her claiming, Kyoko had also finally told Thalia who her mother was and was prepared for her to be angry or not want to be friends anymore. But Thalia surprised her when she simply laughed and said it was about time someone finally gave Zeus the finger, which surprised Kyoko at how hearing Thalia say that about her father. And again, she guessed it was understandable, given Zeus was the one who turned Thalia into a tree, even if it was to save her and leaving her trapped and alone for 4 years. Anyone would feel bitter and angry. Thalia then told Kyoko that it didn't change anything, which relieved the Echidna that her friend and secret crush didn't hate her. She'd also told Thalia about Percy being Poseidon's son, which had surprised her that another of the big three broke the oath. Kyoko had also been telling Thalia of the different ways she could use her powers over wind and electricity lightning, both from her own training to master those elements and the things she learned from anime manga. Thalia had been very eager to try out some of the attacks Kyoko told her about, thankfully she could still use her powers even while in limbo, as it gave her something to do when Kyoko couldn't visit. "Kyoko," Percy said, snapping his fingers in front of her face, making her blink and pulling her from her thoughts. "What?" said Kyoko, annoyed, and moved his hand away. "Well, you weren't answering me and you just kind of spaced out. Anyways, how do you know Thalia is trapped in limbo?" Percy asked. "I'll tell you another time, now come on, we're here," said Kyoko, seeing the green trapdoor above them. Pulling the cord caused the door to swing open and a ladder to fall down. Climbing up, Kyoko wrinkled her nose scent of mildew, rotten wood, and snakes. The attic was filled with Greek hero junk. Armor stands covered in cobwebs. Once bright shields pitted with rust. Old leather steamer trunks plastered with stickers saying Ithaca, Circe's Isle, and Land of the Amazons. One long table was stacked with glass jars filled with pickled things, severed hairy claws, huge yellow eyes, various other parts of monsters. A dusty mounted trophy on the wall looked like a giant snake's head, but with horns and a full set of shark's teeth. The plaque read, Hydra Head No. 1, Woodstock, New York, 1969. By the window, sitting on a wooden tripod stool, was the most gruesome memento of all. A mummy. Not the wrapped in cloth kind, but a human female body shriveled to a husk. She wore a tie-dyed sundress, lots of beaded necklaces, and a headband over long black hair. The skin of her face was thin and leathery over her skull, and her eyes were glassy white slits, as if the real eyes had been replaced by marbles. She'd been dead a long time. "Yeah, cause that just doesn't scream horror film," Kyoko thought sarcastically. The two approached the mummy, though Percy looked like he wanted to leave immediately. Kyoko was tempted to agree with him and leave when the mummy sat up straight and a green mist poured from the mummy's mouth, coiling over the floor in thick tendrils, hissing like 20,000 snakes. Then they heard the voice echo in their heads. "I am the spirit of Delphi, speaker of the prophecies of Phobos Apollo, slayer of the mighty Python. Approach, seeker, and ask." Trading uneasy expressions, Kyoko and Percy stepped forward. "What is my destiny?" they asked at the same time. The mist swirled more thickly, collecting right in front of them and around the table with the pickled monster part jars. Suddenly 5 men appeared. Kyoko didn't recognize 4 of them, but she recognized the last, given the fact it was her own father. Looking at Percy, she saw him clenching his hands, showing he knew who the other men were and clearly didn't like them. They then all looked at them and started speaking in the oracle's voice. "You shall go west and face the god who has turned. You shall find what was stolen and see it safely returned. You shall be betrayed by one who calls you a friend. And you shall fail to save what matters most in the end. The queen's daughter shall return the symbol of darkness at the cost of deteriorating her light." With that, the figures dissolved into green mist and returned to the mummy's mouth. "Wait. What do you mean? What friend? What will I fail to save?" Percy questioned, but he didn't receive an answer. Seeing him worrying over his part of the prophecy, Kyoko put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry so much, nothing's set in stone, and besides, if you worry too much about what might happen in the future, you'll lose sight of what's in front of you," Kyoko said, with Percy nodding slowly. "Well, at least your part is easy enough to figure out. Percy said, while Kyoko nodded with a frown. Yeah, but it also means things are worse than we thought, especially if the Helm of Darkness has been stolen as well, said Kyoko. Later. Well? Chiron asked them once they had come out of the big house. She said we would retrieve what was stolen. Percy said, while slumping down into the pinnacle table. That's great, said Grover as he chewed on the remains of a Diet Coke can. What did the oracle say exactly? This is important. Chiron stressed, knowing prophecies can be interpreted in many different ways, depending on the wording. She said we would go west and face a god who had turned. We would retrieve what was stolen and see it safely returned. Percy said. Anything else? Asked Chiron, with Percy hesitating for a moment. No, that's about it. Percy said. Kyoko didn't say anything about Percy keeping part of the prophecy to himself, given she's sure it was private and given he didn't have many friends at camp, he didn't want to be on edge by tipping off a potential traitor. Very well. From what you say of the prophecy, there can only be one god who the oracle is referring to. Someone who harbors a grudge, who has been unhappy with his lot since the world was divided eons ago, whose kingdom would grow powerful with the deaths of millions. Someone who hates his brothers for forcing him into an oath to have no more children, an oath that both of them have now broken. Chiron said, with Kyoko rolling her eyes, since that hinting was about as subtle as a flying hammer. Hades. Stated Percy, knowing that they were wrong, given Kyoko's part of the prophecy. The Lord of the Dead is the only possibility, said Chiron. It's not Hades. He's missing something too. Kyoko said, cutting into the conversation. What do you mean? Asked Annabeth, speaking for the first time after having sat silently and simply observed. Simple, my part of the prophecy was basically that I would return the Helm of Darkness to Hades. Said Kyoko, surprising the others at hearing this. Then why didn't he ever say anything? That's two symbols of power that have been stolen. Annabeth said, since if it was revealed two of the big three had their prized weapons stolen, it'd push them even further to try and find the thief. Well, let's see, he's feared by his entire family, was sent to the underworld alone with only the dead keeping him company, is only allowed on Olympus during the winter solstice, and frankly has never been given a reason to trust anyone. Now ask yourself, Annabeth, if you were Hades, would you trust anyone enough to tell them your symbol of power was stolen, or simply try and find it yourself? Kyoko questioned, with Annabeth looking away, seeing her point. That would explain the fury that attacked Percy. Chiron said in realization, Hades must believe that Percy is responsible for stealing the Master Bolt and his Helm of Darkness. Still, it would be best if you still traveled to the underworld. While Hades may not be the thief, you might still find some answers as to the true culprit. Chiron said, with Percy groaning as he covered his face. So, let me get this straight, we're supposed to go to the underworld and confront the Lord of the Dead. Percy said. Check. Said Chiron. Find two of the most powerful weapons in the universe. Check. Annabeth said. And get them back before the summer solstice, in 10 days. Sound about right. Said Kyoko dully. Awesome. Muttered Percy, before looking at Grover, who looked incredibly nervous and afraid. You don't have to go. I won't ask that of you. Percy said, not wanting to put his friend in danger. No, it's just that Satyr's an underground place as well. You saved my life, Percy. If you're serious about wanting me along, I won't let you down. Grover said determined. All the way, G-man. Percy said in relief, before looking at Chiron. So, where do we go? The oracle just said to go west. Said Percy, once again annoyed at the vagueness. The entrance to the underworld is always in the west. It moves from age to age, just like Olympus. Right now, of course, it's in America. Chiron said. And right now, it's in the City of Angels. Added a smirking Kyoko. Los Angeles. Of course, it is. Anything else? Percy asked. Yes, normally only 3 people go on a quest, but given you both have parts to play, you'll be allowed 2 companions. Chiron said. Gee, who else would be stupid enough to volunteer for a quest like this? Percy said, feigning ignorance while looking at Annabeth, who smirked. I've been waiting a long time for a quest, seaweed brain. Athena is no fan of Poseidon, but if you're going to save the world, I'm the best person to keep you from messing up. And to keep Kyoko from causing too much destruction. Annabeth said, giving Kyoko a deadpan look, with the Uchiha having a mock-hurt expression. Annie, I'm hurt when have I ever? They're still rebuilding the climbing wall after you knocked it down. Stated Annabeth with a deadpan expression. The lava ruined my Akame Georgia kill shirt. Kyoko muttered in her defense. I suppose you have a plan, wise girl. Percy asked, getting back on topic while mentally swearing to never mess up any of Kyoko's clothes. Do you want my help or not? Retorted Annabeth. Okay, we got our team. What next? Questioned Kyoko while looking at Chiron. This afternoon, we can take you as far as the bus terminal in Manhattan. after that, you are on your own," Chiron replied. Lightning flashed. Rain poured down on the meadows that were never supposed to have violent weather. "No time to waste, I think you should all get packing," said Chiron, knowing their time limit just started. Later. After leaving the big house, Kyoko had stopped by Thalia's tree to fill her in on everything that happened, the quest, the prophecy, and that the Helm of Darkness had also been stolen. Thalia had been worried of how bad things have already gotten between her father and uncle, and knew if the Master Bolt wasn't returned soon, it'd only get worse. She was also annoyed that she couldn't do anything to help from in the tree and could simply wish Kyoko luck. Kyoko had then returned to her cabin and began packing her supplies, weapons, ambrosia, change of clothes, along with some mortal money, and drachmae, having found a drawer in her closet, had also been stocked with plenty of money from different countries. Mom really thinks of everything, doesn't she? Kyoko thought while sealing her scrolls away into the seals on her wrists. She then went to get changed but stopped to look at another scroll. Should I really take these with me? Wondered Kyoko as she picked up the scroll and immediately she heard the whisper. Even while sealed away, the blades still called out to her. Though it wasn't just one blade, these were her prized weapons that her father gave her before he passed away, and they were unlike any sword she's ever seen. Even in all the stories and legends her mother told her of weapons wielded by heroes, these ones were still unlike any other. But that's also what made them the most dangerous, since in order to wield one of them, you must wield the other to counterbalance it. And while one of them was something Kyoko would have no problem with, it was the second blade that caused her problems. She didn't want to risk using them, especially if she lost control of the blade's curse and attacked her friends. Then again, the prophecy said we'd face a god who had turned. And while it may not be Hades, there's still a chance we'll be forced to fight a god, and if that's true, I can't risk not being prepared. Kyoko thought before sealing the scroll away as well. She's just thankful she made sure the blade's thirst was thoroughly sated before coming to Earth. But that done, Kyoko changed into civilian attire, consisting of a bleached shirt showing Ichigo in his Bankai form, while half his body was his inner hollow, a black hoodie with red flames along the bottom and cuffs with the Uchiha symbol on the right side and on the back, navy blue jeans, and black shoes, showing Majin Vegeta with the words "I clawed my way out of hell" on them. Now finished, Kyoko exited her cabin and made her way to Half-Blood Hill. Percy, Annabeth, Grover, Chiron, and Argus were already there. The latter three did a double take at her attire, while Percy and Annabeth didn't react, already knowing about Kyoko's love for anime manga, so her attire didn't surprise them that much. Grover though was surprised, given he didn't spend as much time with Kyoko as Percy and Annabeth did, only knowing her by her title and the image she portrays to the rest of the camp. "Yo." Kyoko greeted. "Kyoko, that's rather interesting attire," Chiron said, knowing that Kyoko was fond of anime manga but didn't think it was this much. Kyoko just shrugged. She ordered some things with her laptop but also found the clothes in her closet were suited to her taste as well. Before they could go, they heard footsteps. Looking, they saw Luke running towards them, carrying a pair of basketball shoes. Kyoko rolled her eyes when Annabeth blushed, like she always did when Luke showed up. Luke stopped for a moment to look at Kyoko's outfit in surprise, before turning to Percy. "Hey. I'm glad that I caught you," Luke said smiling. "Just wanted to say good luck and I thought maybe you could use these," said Luke, handing Percy the sneakers. "Those aren't, are they?" thought Kyoko as she narrowed her eyes. "My," Luke said as wings sprouted from the heels of the shoes. "They are. Just what are you planning?" Kyoko thought while looking at Luke suspiciously. Despite appearing friendly and cordial with Luke, Kyoko never really trusted him. While she may not have the best social skills and had limited interactions with people, she had been trained by her parents to be able to detect lies and deceit, and something about Luke always seemed fake to her. Her suspicions were only strengthened when she managed to catch Luke glaring at her and Percy when they were claimed. Sporting an angry but also calculating look in his eyes, like he was trying to figure out how they could benefit him. This only confirms that she was right to be suspicious, as he knows Percy is a son of Poseidon, and giving him flying shoes should be sending all the wrong signals. Kyoko was pulled from her thoughts in time to see Percy give Grover the shoes, making her nod and be given a sword, riptide, by Chiron. Seeing they were all ready, they went to enter the van, but were stopped again when someone else came running towards them. This time it was Charles Beckendorf carrying a wooden box. "Phew, I'm glad I caught you guys before you left," Beckendorf said before holding out the box to Kyoko, who gasped in excitement. "Are these?" "Yep, just put the finishing touches on them. Built exactly to the designs you provided, and I have to say these are some of the best things I've built in a while," Beckendorf said while smiling happily, since not only were they great to build but also a challenge. The others were curious of what exactly Kyoko asked Beckendorf to build and went to see Kyoko open the box. In the box was a set of regular black leather bracers with metal plates, engraved with the Uchiha clan symbol, with peacock feathers sprouting from the top. At first, they didn't see what was so special about them until Kyoko picked one up and revealed a complex mechanism on the bottom part of the bracers. Slipping the bracers on her wrists and tightening them, Kyoko flicked her wrists, causing 6-inch blades to pop out of the bracers, surprising them. "You built hidden blades?" Percy said in amazement at seeing the trademark weapons of the Assassin's Creed series. "Built them and improved them. The blades are made from celestial bronze, and that metal you gave me, Kyoko. They also include the dart launcher, the hidden gun, the pivot blade to rotate the blades and use them like daggers, and one side is serrated, perfect for skinning and hunting." Beckendorf listed, while Kyoko was giddy with excitement, testing out the pivot blade function. These were the perfect weapons for an assassin or a ninja. They were easily hidden and could be used to kill someone before they even realized what happened, plus she could load sleep darts, poison darts, or berserk darts. And the hidden gun would be a surprise attack for a long-range kill. Plus she had given Beckendorf some chakra metal to use with the celestial bronze, allowing her to channel her chakra into them for additional strength. "Thank you, Beckendorf, these are better than I could have imagined," Kyoko said as the blades returned to their sheaths, with Beckendorf waving it off. "No thanks are needed, it was great working on those. If you ever needed anything else built, you know where to find me. And good luck on the quest, guys," Beckendorf said, while waving as he returned to his cabin. "Alright, let's get the movie on the street," Kyoko said, while getting in the van. "Show on the road," Annabeth corrected, with Kyoko's head popping out with a sheepish grin. "That too." Kyoko, Percy, Annabeth and Grover exited the van with Argus helping the latter three with their bags. Kyoko didn't need help, given she kept all her stuff sealed away on her person. It hadn't taken them too long to arrive in Manhattan, with it now being sunset and starting to rain, with Argus dropping them off at Greyhound Station. When she had gotten her first look at the massive city, Kyoko had been amazed, having never seen such a large city or giant buildings in the elemental nations, and having only read about them during her lessons with Annabeth. Though the novelty didn't last, as she became irritated with all the different sounds, smells and lights. Not to mention, she could hardly feel any natural energy at all, which only added to her irritation. And what natural energy she could feel felt tainted and corrupted, which made her sick. Ichi had then noticed Percy pulling something off a mailbox. She was able to see that it had his picture on it just before he ripped it to shreds. "Something wrong?" Kyoko asked as Percy threw the shredded paper in a nearby trash can. "Just by a stepfather being a giant prick, so nothing new," Percy muttered darkly, before gaining a pensive look as he looked off in a random direction. "You want to know why she married him, Percy?" Grover asked, shouldering his backpack and seeing where Percy was looking. "Were you reading my mind or something?" Percy questioned, looking at the satyr. "Just your emotions. Guess I forgot to tell you that satyrs can do that. You were thinking about your mom and your stepdad, right?" said Grover. Percy just nodded silently. "Your mom married Gabe for you, you call him smelly, but you've got no idea. The guy has this aura, yuck. I can smell him from here. I can smell traces of him on you, and you haven't been near him for a week," Grover said, while turning a bit green at the thought of the odor. "Thanks, where's the nearest shower?" Percy said sarcastically. "You should be grateful, Percy. Your stepfather smelled so repulsively human that he could mask the presence of any demigod. As soon as I took a whiff inside his Camaro, I knew Gabe has been covering your scent for years. If you hadn't lived with him every summer, you probably would have been found by monsters a long time ago. Your mom stayed with him to protect you. She was a smart lady. She must have loved you a lot to put up with that guy, if that makes you feel any better," Grover said comfortingly. Kyoko saw the struggle in Percy's eyes, it didn't make him any feel better. In fact, Kyoko knew Percy probably didn't even care about this quest or retrieving the lightning bolt, only about getting his mom out of the underworld. She wouldn't be surprised if he also resented, or even hated, Poseidon. Not that Kyoko can blame him, if it was either of her parents, she wouldn't care about anything else but saving them. As they waited for the bus to arrive, Annabeth, Percy and Grover started playing hacky sack with one of Grover's apples. Annabeth showing off by bouncing it off her elbow, shoulder and knee. Kyoko didn't partake as she pulled out her journal, which she filled out with ideas that she had for jutsu, weapons, armor, seals and other things she could use to improve herself. Though she looked when she saw that Grover ended up eating the entire apple, core, stem and all. Finally, the bus arrived and the four boarded it, though Kyoko stiffened slightly as her danger senses went off. "What is it?" Annabeth asked after seeing that she stopped. "Nothing, just keep on guard," Kyoko warned, since she didn't know what was nearby, only that it was dangerous. Thankfully, they found seats at the back of the bus. Though Kyoko soon became aware of what set her on edge when three old ladies got on the bus. They all wore a crumpled velvet dress, lace gloves, and carried big paisley purses. They also wore shapeless knit hats that were colored orange, purple, and green respectively. One of them looked up, showing black eyes, and Kyoko cursed as she realized who they were. The kindly ones, all three of them. Kyoko muttered, with her fellow demigods gulping, while Grover shook nervously. I thought you said they could be dispelled for a lifetime. Percy muttered to Annabeth, remembering what she told him about what happens to monsters when they are killed. I said if you're lucky, you're obviously not. Retorted Annabeth. All three of them die immortals. Grover whimpered. Kyoko remained calm, while getting ready to use her hidden blades to kill them quickly, though she hoped there's a chance it could be resolved peacefully. It's okay, the Furies. The three worst monsters from the underworld. No problem. No problem. Well, just slip out the windows. Annabeth said, thinking hard on the different escape routes. They don't open. There also isn't a back exit, even if there was one, we're almost at a tunnel. Kyoko said, having already looked for possible exits when they got on the bus after she sensed danger. Crap. Muttered Annabeth, knowing this just got a lot harder. They won't attack us with witnesses around, will they? Percy asked, figuring the Furies wouldn't want to expose themselves and the Greek world to mortals. Mortals don't have good eyes, their brains can only process what they see through the mist. Replied Annabeth. Basically, they'll only see three old ladies killing us or us killing them. Kyoko clarified. They could see that or something else. Either way, we can't count on mortals for help, maybe in. Before you say anything, there's no hatch on the roof either. Kyoko cut off. Wonderful. Annabeth said, pinching the bridge of her nose. Just then, the Furies got up and spoke in flat voices, like they had rehearsed what they would say. I have to use the restroom. So do I. So do I. Let's see if we can try negotiating first. They were obviously sent here, believing that Percy stole the Helm of Darkness. Maybe we can get them to see he didn't do it. Kyoko suggested, since she'd prefer avoiding a fight on a confined and crowded bus. Maybe, but just in case, Percy, take my hat. Annabeth said, passing her invisibility hat to Percy. What? Percy asked, not knowing the hat's power. It'll turn you invisible. Go up the aisle and let them pass you, get to the front and get away. Annabeth said. Percy looked ready to argue but nodded reluctantly since Kyoko was still there and could handle the Furies if it came to that. The moment Percy put the hat on, he vanished from their sight. It looked like the Furies might have caught his scent but kept moving forward. Once they reached the back of the bus, they instantly zeroed in on Kyoko and let out a hideous wail and began transforming. Their faces were still the same, but their bodies had shriveled into leathery brown hag bodies with bats' wings and hands and feet like gargoyle claws. Their handbags had also turned into fiery whips. Where is it, girl? One of the Furies hissed as the other people on the bus began screaming and cowering in their seats. The Helm of Darkness isn't here. I didn't steal it and neither did Percy. We're trying to find it and the Master Bolt. Kyoko said calmly, hoping they would listen, though the Furies shrieked angrily. The fact you know the helm is missing proves your guilt, daughter of Hera. Give us the helm or suffer eternal torment. The Furies demanded. Hearing this, Annabeth drew her knife while Grover grabbed a tin can and prepared to throw it. Though before they could attack, the bus suddenly jerked to the side, throwing the Furies and mortals around the bus. Kyoko was able to keep her balance by channeling chakra to her feet and looked to front, seeing the driver seemed to be fighting for control of the wheel with an invisible force. Knowing it was Percy, Kyoko took the opening and activated her Sharingan before locking eyes with the Furies. Ninjutsu? Sharingan. Kyoko said, trapping them in an illusion, but she didn't know for how long. Not wasting a second, Kyoko drove her hidden blades through two of the Furies' heads, while Annabeth stabbed her knife in the third one's chest. Thankfully, all three Furies disintegrated into gold dust, while one of their whips was left behind as a spoils of war. Though while the Furies were dealt with, they still had to worry about the bus wheel being fought over. But they didn't have to worry about that long when it suddenly spun around and crashed into a tree. Ugh, I'm going to kill that seaweed brain. Annabeth growled while standing up on shaky legs. Kyoko though tensed when she heard thunder overhead and quickly sealed up her friend's bags, along with picking up the whip. Annabeth seemed to have the same idea of what was happening. Get off the bus, now. Annabeth shouted. Not needing to be told twice, the four questers ran off the bus while the rest of the passengers were wondering what was going on. Hey, what about our Percy started? I have them sealed away. We need to get away now. Kyoko said as they made some distance between them and the bus. Not a moment later, a bolt of lightning shot out of the sky, straight onto the bus, destroying it much to everyone's shock. Oh. Percy muttered, looking at the flaming bus with wide eyes. Come on. Let's just be glad that Kyoko managed to seal our stuff in time. Annabeth said, motioning to the woods, knowing they had to get away, with the boys nodding in agreement, relieved that their stuff was safe. Kyoko, meanwhile, glared up at the sky. "Hey. Asshole. We're trying to get your stupid toy and you're trying to kill us. Do you want the damn bolt back or not?" Kyoko shouted at the sky. Olympus. Meanwhile, in the Olympian throne room, Zeus was trying to make himself as small as possible, as all the gods and goddesses were giving him pointed looks. Especially Hera, Poseidon, Athena, and Hestia. "You know, she kind of has a point. What idiot tries hindering a quest to retrieve their own weapon?" Apollo whispered to Hermes, not wanting their father to overhear them. "The warmongering kind." Hermes replied quietly. "Will you two be quiet?" Artemis whispered, while glaring at her brothers. Though she didn't rebuke their statements, since even she had to admit that Zeus wasn't winning himself any allies if he and Poseidon do go to war by hindering the quest. The fact that said hindering nearly killed the questers didn't help either. But Kyoko, Percy, Annabeth, and Grover. "Are you insane? I told you to run, but instead you crashed the bus and nearly got us thrown into the river. What were you thinking?" "Don't answer, because you clearly weren't." Annabeth shouted as she chewed Percy out for his reckless actions. "Enough, Annabeth. What Percy did doesn't matter because it wouldn't have made a difference. The Furies refused to listen and would have attacked anyway, which likely would have resulted in the bus crashing regardless. At least this way, we don't have to worry about them calling for reinforcements, and besides, we got one of their whips." Kyoko said, holding up said whip, with Annabeth reluctantly nodding in agreement since the Furies would have attacked anyway. "So, who gets it?" Percy asked. "Here, Annie," said Kyoko, tossing the whip to the surprised Annabeth. "Me? Why?" Annabeth asked, not knowing why Kyoko gave her the whip. "Well, for one, it'll be good for you to have a mid to long range weapon that can incapacitate enemies, given the Fury's whips can induce intense pain, along with being able to create hellfire, so it'll be a good alternative to your knife. Besides, I already have several fire jutsu, its pyrokinetic powers wouldn't match with Percy's water-based powers. And do you really see Grover of all people using a whip? Much less one used by a Fury?" Kyoko asked, while motioning to Grover, who was shivering just by looking at the whip. Hearing her reasons, Annabeth nodded, seeing the logic behind them, and attached the whip to her belt. She wasn't going to use it on the quest since she didn't know how to use a whip, but she'll train with it back at camp. Though she scowled at Kyoko's next words. "Besides, you're already a sadist, so now you have a weapon to match." Kyoko said. "I'm not a sadist." Annabeth denied, given Kyoko's been calling her a sadist ever since she forced her to watch those videos for cheating with her Sharingan and shadow clones during her lessons. "Sure you aren't, Annie, sure you aren't." Kyoko said in a flat tone, obviously not believing her. "I'm not." Later. After walking through the woods for a while, with Kyoko unsealing a few snacks for the others or tin cans for Grover, they soon came upon a two-lane road. They saw a closed-down gas station, a billboard, and an open business with neon lights and the scent of food. It was one of those weird roadside curio shops that sell lawn flamingos, wooden Indians, cement grizzly bears, and stuff like that. The main building was a long, low warehouse, surrounded by acres of statuary. The bright red neon sign on the front gave the demigods a headache with their dyslexia, especially since it was written in cursive. Blinking a few times and focusing, they were able to make out what was written. "Auntie M's Garden Gnome Emporium," Kyoko said, while seeing the entrance was flanked by two cement garden gnomes. Kyoko then saw Percy and Annabeth crossing the street. "Boy, what are you doing?" Kyoko said, while grabbing them by the arm and pulling them back. "The lights are on inside, maybe it's open." Annabeth said. "Maybe they have a snack bar," added Percy, smelling the food inside. "Are you too crazy? This place is weird," Grover said, getting a bad feeling from the shop. Kyoko nodded in agreement as something just seemed off about the stone statues in the front of the shop. It felt like they were watching them. "Eyes, I think we should leave," Kyoko said. "Yeah, I smell monsters," added Grover. "Your nose is clogged up from the Furies. All I smell is burgers. Aren't you both hungry?" Annabeth questioned. "I'm a vegetarian," Grover retorted. "One of my mother's sacred animals are cows," said Kyoko, now knowing that something was wrong. Suddenly, the doors creaked open and they saw someone standing there. An adult woman wearing a long black gown covering her entire body except her hands and head, a black veil covering the upper part of her face, long purple hair that went all the way down to her feet, and her hands and lower face showing her pale skin. Looking at the woman warily, Kyoko could sense several emotions from her. Mostly sadness, despair, and the biggest one being rage. "Children, it is too late to be out all alone. Where are your parents?" the woman asked with a soft and silky voice. Annabeth said, trying to think of something to say. "We're orphans," Percy blurted out. "Orphans?" But, my dears. Surely not. The woman said in a rather convincing tone. Kyoko smacked Percy before he could say anything else that was stupid. We're lost and if you could point us in the right direction to the nearest bus or train station, that'd be appreciated. Kyoko said, wanting to get away from here as fast as possible. Oh, my dears, you must come in, you poor children. I am Auntie M. Go straight through to the back of the warehouse, please. There is a dining area. Said Auntie M. No, that's fine, we don't want to intrude. Kyoko stopped when she saw Percy and Annabeth going inside, with Grover following nervously. Mentally groaning, Kyoko followed them inside. The warehouse was filled with more statues of people in different poses, with all of them wearing different outfits and sporting different expressions on their faces. While doing nothing to ease the tension Kyoko felt or the confusion when she felt a spike of rage whenever Auntie M looked at Percy or Annabeth. Something is definitely not right here. Kyoko thought as they reached the dining area. Please, sit down. Auntie M said. We don't have any money ma'am. Grover said. No, children. No money. This is a special case, yes. It is my treat for such nice orphans. Said Auntie M with a kind smile. Thank you ma'am. Annabeth said gratefully. Kyoko noticed how Auntie M stiffened at Annabeth's words, while her smile became strained, as if she's forcing herself to be nice. Quite alright, Annabeth. You have such beautiful grey eyes, child. Such beautiful eyes. Auntie M nearly hissed. How does she know Annabeth's name? Kyoko thought in alarm. Kyoko's eyes followed Auntie M behind the snack counter before she returned with several trays double cheeseburgers, vanilla shakes, and XXL servings of French fries. No thank you, I'm not really hungry. Kyoko said politely, refusing to eat cow meat. Forgive me, I suppose you wouldn't like such food Kyoko. Said Auntie M in a kindlier tone than before, which just confused Kyoko further. Though Kyoko then began hearing a hissing sound but couldn't pinpoint the source. What's that hissing sound? Grover asked. Hissing? Perhaps you hear the deep fryer oil. You have keen ears, Grover. Said Auntie M. I take vitamins. For my ears. That's admirable, but please, relax. Auntie M cooed softly. Kyoko's eyes darted around the warehouse, keeping aware of her surroundings and hoping to find out what was setting her on edge. Though her eyes then fell on a statue of a young girl holding an Easter basket. The detail was incredible, much better than you see in most garden statues. But something was wrong with her face. It looked as if she were startled or even terrified. Immediately, it clicked together for Kyoko on where they were and who this woman was. And she knew that they needed to get out of here, especially Percy and Annabeth. Looking at the woman, after now realizing who she was, Kyoko couldn't help but pity her for the pain she suffered. You notice some of my creations do not turn out well. They are marred. They do not sell. The face is the hardest to get right. Always the face. Auntie M said, while muttering the last part. You make these statues yourself? Percy asked, while feeling a bit sleepy. Yes, I once had 2 sisters who I loved and protected, but they're gone now. Leaving me alone with just my statues. Alone, always alone Auntie M said with real sadness and pain in her voice. 2 sisters? Annabeth said, pausing in her eating as her mind started clearing up after hearing that. In response, Auntie M looked at Annabeth with a cold smile that also had a dangerous edge to it. It's a long and terrible story, not one suited for children I'm sure. You see Annabeth, I was once a priestess, one loyal and devoted to my patron. But my patron, she had a rivalry with a petty and cruel god. My patron and the god both desired to be the patron of a city, with my patron being able to win a competition between them. But the god was a petty man, and in retaliation, he tried to seduce me, his rival's priestess, within her own temple. I rejected his advances, desiring to remain loyal to my patron, but I underestimate just how cruel the gods can be. So, he took me against my will right before my patron's statue. Again and again and again. I begged and pleaded for him to stop, for my patron to help me, but no help ever came. When the god finally left, I pleaded for my patron for forgiveness and mercy. But do you know what she did instead? Auntie M said as she was practically shaking with rage at this point. Annabeth, now looking both incredibly pale and sick, shook her head slowly. With Grover and Percy also looking pale and sick at the story, though Kyoko just looked at her in sadness. Though the 4 immediately jumped up from the table when Auntie M stood up and then threw the table across the warehouse. Don't look in her eyes. Kyoko shouted as they all closed their eyes or looked away. She turned me into this. Auntie M roared, tearing her veil and cloak off, revealing the monster underneath. The ends of her purple hair gathered together and transformed into snake heads, black and gold scales appeared on her arms and legs, with her nails growing into talons, a long snake tail grew out of her lower back, and her only clothing consisted of an armored bikini. Medusa. Kyoko said, while Percy, Annabeth and Grover were a little shocked and afraid at learning just who they were dealing with. Though Percy and Annabeth also realized who Medusa was talking about in her story. Their parents. That's right, Kyoko Uchiha. What's the matter Percy Jackson, Annabeth Chase, don't you wish to look at the result of your father raping me and your mother abandoning me? Go on, look at the monster they created. Medusa hissed, while her eyes glowed with her desire to turn them to stone. Yo, you're lying, that's not how the legend goes. Annabeth said, refusing to believe Medusa's story. Though she shivered when Medusa giggled darkly. What use do I have lying when I plan to kill you? Medusa asked, making Percy and Annabeth stiffening, since that was true. What did he gain by lying to people she's going to kill? That is the truth, your parents are nothing but a rapist and a traitor. They used me and then tossed me aside, turning me into this creature you see now. The only ones who didn't abandon me were my sisters. They stayed by my side, even as I slowly turned into a monster, into the Gorgon. Even when I killed hundreds of people, they stayed with me until the point where I saw them as intruders in my territory, but even then, they stayed. And in the end, when I only saw them as intruders, I devoured them. My own sisters. Poseidon and Athena took everything from me, my innocence, my humanity, my family. Everything. And now they'll get to see their own children turned to stone and shattered. Though while I'm sure they'll just make some replacements, I can at least hope that it'll hurt for a moment. Medusa said cruelly. Kyoko glanced at Percy and Annabeth, seeing them not even trying to reach for their weapons. Medusa's words and story had destroyed their will to fight back. No choice. Kyoko thought, while activating her Manjicum Sharingan. Mahakala. Kyoko called out, activating one of her Manjicum Sharingan's powers. Immediately, the moment the word left her, time froze around Kyoko as her friends and Medusa became as still as the statues around them. I have 10 seconds. Kyoko thought, while unsealing a celestial bronze katana, she didn't pull out one of her personal weapons, since the situation didn't call for it. Moving quickly to the side, Kyoko went to decapitate Medusa, but she hesitated for a moment. Looking at Medusa, who was thankfully blinking, so her eyes were closed, Kyoko felt her sadness for her grow when she saw that she had been crying. She wasn't always a monster. She was just an innocent girl who was used and then tossed aside. Kyoko thought, angry at seeing firsthand one of the millions of lives ruined because of the gods. I'm sorry for this. But I swear, I'll find a way to save you, I promise. Kyoko said. While Kyoko never swore on sticks, she was a girl of her word. If she made a promise or an oath, then she'd kept it and didn't need a threat to keep it. Seeing that time was starting to move again, Kyoko swung her sword and decapitated Medusa. Percy, Annabeth and Grover flinched when they heard the thump and slowly turned to see what it was. Only for their eyes to widen in shock when they saw Medusa's severed head while Kyoko was on her hands and knees, panting. Kyoko. Annabeth said as they rushed over to her. Lifting her head up, they saw blood leaking from her left eye. Kyoko, your eye, Annabeth said while trailing off at the end. It's fine, just my Manjicum Sharingan takes its toll, even for one use. Kyoko said while wiping the blood away. What did you do? Percy asked hesitantly. It's called Mahakala, one of 3 powers that my Manjicum Sharingan grants me. Kyoko answered while not elaborating any further since she didn't want people finding out just how powerful her eyes were. Mahakala was the Manjicum power in her left eye. It allowed her to freeze time in the surrounding area for 10 seconds, but it could only be used 5 times a day. If she used it any more than 5 times, then she'd temporarily go blind. It's also why she constantly makes sure to improve her speed and agility, allowing her to use those 10 seconds to their fullest. But it also puts a bigger strain on her eyes than Amaterasu and Susanoo. Nodding slowly, they then turned to Medusa's head with Percy and Annabeth immediately feeling nauseous as they remembered her story. But it wasn't true, right? Percy asked slowly, while praying that she had lied, just to hurt them. While he may be angry at his father, he didn't want to hear the fact that he raped a woman just to get back at Athena. It's true, all of it. Kyoko said while standing up with their head snapped towards her. You knew? Annabeth demanded, horrified that Medusa really wasn't lying to them. Kyoko simply nodded solemnly. Percy stumbled slightly at hearing this while Annabeth covered her mouth and swallowed her vomit. She's known about the Greek world for years and had always believed that Medusa was Poseidon's girlfriend. Now to hear that wasn't only not true, but that she was once been a priestess of Athena before she was raped by Poseidon and her mother turned her into. Annabeth couldn't hold it in anymore and ran to a nearby trash can before emptying her stomach's contents. Percy would have as well, the only reason he wasn't was because he's still, thankfully, in shock. As well as still being new to the supernatural world. How? How did you know? Annabeth asked while wiping her mouth and eyes. My mother. She told me the truth of all the legends and myths, every act of cruelty, every destroyed city, every curse. She told me the truth about all the gods and goddesses. Including herself. Kyoko said, which only horrified them as they wondered what other legends were false also. And you still care about her? Knowing everything she and the other gods have done? How? Annabeth asked, since after learning the truth about Medusa, she wasn't sure she could even look at her mother, the woman she idolized, and not wonder about who else she made suffer. Because, she was honest. She could have lied and told me the altered legends, but she didn't. She told me the truth, knowing I could have ended up hating her for what she's done, for those that suffered from her anger. And yes, I'll admit that I was horrified and hated her at first. But I eventually forgave her, after seeing that she genuinely regretted what she's done and wanted to become a better person. That's why I can still be proud to be her daughter. Kyoko said. And how can we be proud, knowing our parents did that to an innocent person? Percy demanded, while pointing at Medusa's head. Percy didn't want to think about it, but what would have happened if his mom had rejected Poseidon? It made him sick to thinking about it, but how could he not after hearing Medusa's story? I don't know, it's an answer that you can only figure out on your own. There is even a good chance that you may never forgive them for their sins. Kyoko said, not having an answer for them, since it's different for each person, depending on their personality and/or the circumstances of how they learned the truth of their godly parent. She was able to come to terms with it because her mother told her the truth from the very beginning. But Percy has only just learned who his father was, while Annabeth grew up idolizing her mother. While she wanted to help her friends, she couldn't, as this was something that they'd have to figure out for themselves. For a moment, Percy remained silent before storming off to the back office, returning with a box and the address to the entrance of the underworld. Setting the box down, Percy placed Medusa's head inside before scribbling a note addressed to his father and Athena. We know. From Percy and Annabeth. Do you have to involve me in this? Annabeth asked, concerned with how this could be taken. Are you just going to brush this under the rug like them? Retorted Percy, refusing to ignore this. Looking at the head again, Annabeth nodded since this wasn't something she can just forget. Putting the note inside, Percy sealed the box and wrote the address on top before placing some drachma on it. It then vanished with the sound of a register. We'll head to North Carolina, which will give us a surefire way to Southern California. Though we'll have to take a train, then see about getting a ride to California. Kyoko said after a moment, with the others nodding in agreement. With that, the four questers exited the Emporium. After leaving Auntie M's and getting the address to the entrance of the underworld, the four questers had set out to continue their journey. At the moment, they were heading towards Pennsylvania, where they'd catch a train to North Carolina. After that they'd make their way through Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico and Arizona, before finally making it to Los Angeles in California. Currently, the four were walking through the forest towards Pennsylvania, while planning to catch a bus if they came across a bus station. Kyoko was walking in the front with Percy, Annabeth and Grover right behind her, with the former two having been silent ever since the encounter with Medusa. The two demigods were still processing what they had learned, though Percy was mostly just angry at his father, even more than he already was. Annabeth, meanwhile, was trying to think of any possible explanation that could excuse what her mother did, but they were either impossible to believe or always showed Medusa was just a victim. What else did your mom tell you, Kyoko? Besides about the gods? Percy said, after getting tired of the silence, with Annabeth also being thankful at being pulled from her thoughts. Mostly about monsters, all the ones I would encounter when I eventually came to Earth. Replied Kyoko, while idly spinning a kunai on her finger. Wouldn't you have just learned about those at camp? Annabeth asked, given all campers were aware of every monster in the Greek pantheon, so it'd seem kind of pointless to learn about them earlier. Just the ones you know of. There are literally hundreds of monsters that exist, Annabeth. Some you'd even pass off as actual myths. Kyoko said, having been told by her mother that most of the Greco-Roman faction doesn't acknowledge other pantheons. Something that Kyoko found stupid, since it left a good number of demigods ignorant and unprepared should they encounter monsters and deities from, say, the Norse or Egyptian pantheons for example. In fact, one religion that the Greco-Roman pantheon held a particular hatred and resentment for was the Judeo-Christian pantheon, for stealing their followers. Which is a major reason why the gods are now shadows of what they once were in their prime, during the time of ancient Greece and Rome. Along with why out of all the other pantheons in the world, it's the Judeo-Christian religion that they suppressed and influenced their children to dismiss the most. Like what? Questioned Annabeth, curious of what other monsters there could be, besides the ones she's read about. The Wendigo for starters. Answered the Echidna. The what? Percy asked. The Wendigo, seaweed brain. A man-eating creature or evil spirit from Native American folklore. Said Annabeth, with Kyoko nodding at her words. That's right. The Wendigo is a cannibalistic monster that feeds on human flesh. The legend differs on how a Wendigo comes into existence. Some say it's a malevolent cannibalistic spirit that possesses humans, or they were actually once humans that physically transform into monsters. But what all the legends have in common is that a Wendigo is created whenever someone commits the act of cannibalism. Kyoko explained, with the three paling at the idea of someone eating human flesh and turning into a monster. And what exactly can a Wendigo do? Percy asked, wanting to know in the event he ever encountered one. The Wendigo's abilities are pretty standard. They have enhanced strength, durability, and agility. They're also really fast and can move very quietly to sneak up on their prey, along with being immune to the cold, given Wendigos usually stay in northern regions. Finally, Wendigos have a ravenous and insatiable hunger, never being truly satisfied and always hunting for prey to devour. Kyoko explained, with her friends shivering at the idea of confronting such a monster. Are there any monsters that could be nearby? We should be worried. Annabeth asked, worried that there could be some strong monsters that she didn't know were real that could be near them right now. Kyoko thought about it, going over all the monsters her mother told her about and which could prove a problem for them. Though the Uchiha paused for a moment as she remembered just what state they were currently in and where they currently were. Skreek. The questers immediately covered their ears when they heard an ear-piercing scream, sounding like a mix between thousands of nails on chalkboards and a blood-curdling scream. What the hell is that? Percy shouted over the ringing in his ears. Nothing good, run now. Said Kyoko as they started running through the forest. As they were running, the demigods and the satyr felt the ground shaking while hearing something large running towards them. Taking a risk to look back and see what exactly was chasing them, only for Percy, Annabeth and Grover's eyes to widen in horror at the creature they saw. It was big, probably just a little smaller than a baby elephant, and seemed to be a mixed match of different animals. It had bat-like leathery wings, a forked tail, cloven hooves, a goat-like head, horns, small clawed arms, and a kangaroo-like body. Overall, it was a rather terrifying creature, and worse, it was catching up to them. Kyoko, what is that thing? Annabeth asked, freaking out over seeing something like this. It's not that hard to guess, Annie. Just remember what state we're in. Kyoko replied while pulling out a second kunai. It took a moment for the three to realize what Kyoko meant before Annabeth screamed in pure frustration. Are you kidding me? The god's damn Jersey devil. Annabeth screamed. Like they needed another reason to hate Jersey. Okay. What can this thing do, whoa? Shouted Percy, ducking under a stream of fire that the Jersey devil unleashed. Enhanced strength, speed, dexterity, endurance, stamina, resistance to hot temperature, fire breath, flight, shape-shifting and demonic magic. All standard abilities that a devil or demon may have. Kyoko said while pulling out some ninja wire which she tied to the kunai. What do you mean standard? You know what, never mind. How do we kill it? Annabeth asked, not wanting to know what Kyoko meant by those being the standard abilities that devils and demons possess. She's currently being chased by the Jersey devil. Annabeth did not need to think of devils or demons being real as well. In a minute and when you see the signal, kill it. Kyoko said while testing her makeshift garrote wire. Wait, what signal? Percy asked. Good luck. Said Kyoko before she suddenly vanished in a burst of speed. Kyoko? Annabeth shouted in disbelief. Did she seriously just ditch us? Grover asked while freaking out. Before they could say anything else, the three were forced to jump out of the way as the Jersey devil unleashed another blast of flames at them. Rolling out of the way, Percy uncapped Riptide while Annabeth pulled out her dagger as the Jersey devil screeched at them with flames in its mouth. Suddenly, Kyoko jumped down from a tree branch and landed on the Jersey devil's back, surprising the three. The monster screeched as it tried throwing Kyoko off while the Uchiha quickly wrapped the garrote around its throat, pulling tightly to choke the Jersey devil. Not stopping there, Kyoko stabbed the kunai in and out of the monster's wings, ensuring it couldn't try and fly into the air. Figuring this was the signal Kyoko meant, Percy went to kill the Jersey devil, something he never thought he'd say. But before he could, Annabeth walked right up to the monster and stabbed her knife straight into its head. I hate Jersey. Annabeth shouted as she stabbed the Jersey devil repeatedly in the head, only stopping when it finally died and dissolved into dust. Kyoko, Percy, and Grover looked at Annabeth in disbelief as she panted heavily in anger before taking a deep breath and calming down. You good, Annabeth? Grover asked nervously. I'm fine, perfectly fine. I mean, we just got jazzed by the Jersey devil, something that shouldn't exist. But I'm perfectly fine, now let's just get out of this god's forsaken state. Annabeth said, wanting nothing more than to leave New Jersey. Yeah. And here, since you killed it, you might as well get the spoils of war. Kyoko said, picking up the item the Jersey devil left behind and handing it to Annabeth. It was a blood-red metal helmet in the shape of a demonic goat skull with devil horns sprouting from the side. Looking it over, Annabeth couldn't help but smile in pride at getting a spoils of war that no other demigod has likely received. Even better, it came from a monster like the Jersey Devil, one she killed herself. Though her mood immediately dropped at Kyoko's next words. Besides, now you can wear it with your whip whenever you're satisfying your sadism. Kyoko added. I'm not a sadist. Annabeth shouted, not believing Kyoko was still going on about that. Don't worry Annie, I'm sure the next monster we kill will leave behind a leather outfit to complete the look. Assured Kyoko. One more word out of you and I'll use the whip on you. Annabeth threatened. Oh yes, punish me mistress, I've been a bad girl purred Kyoko, with Annabeth's face turning a bright red as she glared at Kyoko. I hate you, with all of my hate. Annabeth said, through gritted teeth. Oh, I love you too sang Kyoko, getting her friend to blush even more in anger and embarrassment, with the chuckles from Percy and Grover not helping. Olympus. Hera sighed as she sat within her temple, sipping a glass of sake, having developed a taste for it during her time in the elemental nations, all while mentally counting back from 100. The reason for this is she had been keeping a close eye on the quest her daughter and her friends were on, all the way up to when they confronted Medusa. She watched as Medusa revealed the truth of how she was turned into the monstrous Gorgon, Kyoko killing her and telling Annabeth and Percy that it was true, along with the rest of the true legends, Hera told her daughter. When she saw young Percy Jackson send Medusa's head to Olympus, Hera knew it'd only be a matter of time before the other Olympians pieced together just how they knew the truth. And Hera was preparing herself for the coming headache of when Hermes will deliver the head and the inevitable meeting she'll be summoned to. And right on the mark. Hera thought, sensing a meeting was being called right now. Downing the rest of her sake, Hera vanished in a flash of light, reappearing within the Olympian throne room. Looking around, she saw all the other Olympians were already present. Not surprising, was most of them were now glaring at her, with Poseidon and Athena being the angriest. The only ones who weren't glaring were Hephaestus, who was working on one of his inventions, Ares, who was flipping through a weapons catalog, and Hestia, who was tending to the hearth, as per usual. Though Hera saw her eldest sister giving her an understanding look. Hera. What have you done? Zeus demanded, even angrier than he was after the reveal Kyoko was her daughter. I told my daughter the truth about all of us. Stated Hera, knowing what they were talking about and why they were angry. You had no right. Said Poseidon angry at Hera for telling Kyoko the true legends of the gods, along with worried that Percy was now aware of the truth behind Medusa. I had every right. Kyoko is my daughter and I made sure she would see all of us exactly as we are, not how you all choose to see yourselves. Hera retorted. And what about yourself, Hera? Did you tell your demigod of your own cruelty? Athena demanded, believing Hera kept her own cruel acts hidden. I told Kyoko about myself first, everything. Driving Hercules insane, throwing Hephaestus off Olympus, I told her all of it, fully knowing she could hate me, but I told her all the same. And yes, Kyoko was horrified to hear all that I had done, but she still loves me. And you know why. Because I was honest about who I was, I didn't tell her lies. Hera said. And she just forgave you, sister? Questioned Demeter, with Hera glancing at her elder sister. No, she didn't, not at first. It took some time, but eventually she did forgive me. Hera answered, though that wasn't everything Hera did to prove she was trying to be better. Back in the elemental nations, she and Madara had always told Kyoko to take responsibility for her actions and the consequences that would come from the choices she would make. This was to make sure to curb any arrogance and pride Kyoko would develop, given her powerful lineage, and so she wouldn't become like the more prideful and arrogant demigod heroes, let alone like Zeus. Along with knowing when she makes a mistake and to apologize for it. That had been the same thing Kyoko had told Hera when her daughter finally spoke to her again after telling her the truth of the gods. That to prove she was better and has changed. She had to apologize to all the innocent people she has ever hurt, every single one of them. Which is why, not long after returning from the elemental nations, Hera had gone to the underworld to ask Hades for a favor. Flashback. Is this all of them? Hera asked, looking at Hades on his black throne, with the lord of the underworld nodding as he looked over the gathered souls in his throne room, all of them either confused as to why they were here or looking at Hera fearfully. Yes. It's actually surprising, seeing just how many there were. Hades stated, having not expected possibly dozens and dozens of souls needing to be collected. It was even more surprising when Hera, now having red hair oddly enough, herself showed up in the underworld and requested he summon the soul of every single innocent person she's ever wronged. It was definitely not something Hades ever expected and he had wanted to know just what had caused the sudden change in his sister. His curiosity only grew when Hera made him swear on sticks not to reveal what she told him, only to be shocked to learn Hera had actually cheated on Zeus and sired a demigod. Hades would deny it to the end of time, but it actually took him a few minutes to properly register what he just heard. But when it finally did register, the god of the dead actually laughed. He laughed at the fact his man-whore brother was for once getting a taste of his own medicine. Even better was that Hera not only cheated on Zeus, but sired a demigod as well. After he had calmed down, Hades had been more than happy to accept Hera's request and began summoning the souls of all the innocents Hera has wronged. Normally, Hades would demand something in return for summoning this many souls, but the news of Hera siring a demigod more than made up for the request. Now if only he could be on Olympus when Zeus learned as well, just to forever memorize his brother's reaction. Hera took a breath before stepping forward to address the gathered souls. Looking over them all, Hera winced at seeing the majority of them were in fact women who had caught Zeus's eye, along with even a few of the illegitimate children that were unfortunate enough to die from her plots. She could even see Hercules' family, his first wife Megara and their children, who were killed after she drove him insane. After her time in the elemental nations, Hera realized that the women weren't to blame, only being guilty or probably unlucky to have caught Zeus's attention. The children were even less to blame, having not had a choice in who their parents were. And they're all terrified of me. Hera thought, seeing them all look at her with fear, given she had a hand in most of their deaths and torment in life. Taking a moment to collect herself, Hera began speaking. I'm sure you all know me. I am Hera, Queen of Olympus. I'm also the reason most of you ended up here or lived miserable lives. For those of you who were unlucky enough to have gotten the attention of my husband, Zeus. Most of you must be thinking I'm here to make your afterlives as miserable as your lives, but I'm not. The reason I requested my brother to gather you all here is so I can apologize for everything. Hera said, seeing all them either looking shocked or didn't believe her. I know this must be a shock for those that know of my pettiness and grudge, you might not even believe that I'm being sincere. But I am, after certain recent events, I realize now that none of you deserve the pain and hardship I unleashed on you. I know there is nothing I can do to make up for what I've done, only that I can try and be better. I'm sure most of you won't accept it, but I am truly sorry for everything. Hera said, looking at all the gathered souls. She knew it was hopeless to expect them to forgive her after everything she's done, but Hera also knew she had to do this. Both to prove to herself that she wants to be better and to be a better mother for Kyoko. Then flashback. Hera was right, not all of them had accepted her apology, but all of them had at least been impressed at how far she was willing to go. While it may have taken thousands of years, the Queen of Olympus was at least willing to finally acknowledge her mistakes and ask for redemption. Though Hera didn't stop there, she had also spoken to Hephaestus for her cruelty against him and throwing him off Olympus. As while they may have made peace with each other, Hera never truly apologized, something she had done after her trip to the underworld. She had also gone to apologize to Semele, Dionysus's mother, for tricking her into getting Zeus to reveal his true form. Hera was determined to prove that she wanted to be better, a better mother, a better queen, a better goddess. Something the rest of her family could try and do, rather than continuing to hide behind their own self-righteousness. Really, the only ones Hera could honestly say have never wronged or killed a mortal, unless they truly deserved it, were ironically enough, Ares, Hades and Hephaestus. Out of them all, those three were never truly in the wrong in their actions. Ares' affair with Aphrodite notwithstanding. There was also her sister Hestia, but Hera honestly doubted that Hestia had a single mean bone in her body and gets along with everyone. Perhaps now they'll finally start accepting just how terrible we really were. Hera thought, seeing a few of the Olympians looking deep in thought or looking down in shame as they thought over all their past actions. Time skip one day. But Kyoko, Percy, Annabeth and Grover. A day has passed since their encounter with the Jersey Devil, and thankfully, it didn't take them long to reach a bus station and get to Pennsylvania. After that they took a train straight to North Carolina. Since then, they had either walked or taken buses across North Carolina, Tennessee and Arkansas. They had even stolen a car, at Kyoko's insistence, with the Echidna being the one to drive. It had been an experience to say the least. Surprisingly, Kyoko didn't get into a single accident. That's not to say Percy, Annabeth and Grover weren't completely terrified, as Kyoko just made a beeline across several states, not stopping once. Thankfully, the car ran out of gas after they crossed over into Oklahoma, leading to the questers traversing across the state's numerous forests. Kyoko personally enjoyed being out in the wilderness, away from the noise of cities and towns. Though only Grover shared her enthusiasm with being outside, with Annabeth and Percy grumbling at having to climb over giant rocks, cliffsides, and rivers. Personally, Kyoko didn't see the problem, given she'd been put in more dangerous situations by the time she was walking. Currently, it was around midday, with the four having found a forest trail that'd hopefully lead them to a road that'll take them into New Mexico. After that, it'll just be a few more states to traverse before they reach Los Angeles. Though as they continued walking, Kyoko narrowed her eyes as the longer they walked, the more it felt like they were being followed. She'd occasionally look behind them to see if she'd catch a glimpse of anything. Could you please stop doing that? Percy asked, getting tired of Kyoko constantly glancing behind them since it just put him more on edge than he already was and felt like any second something was going to jump out and attack them. Sorry, but don't any of you get the feeling we're being followed? Kyoko asked. Only from you constantly looking behind us, replied Annabeth, with Grover bleeding nervously as he looked around. She's right guys, I've been smelling monsters, lots of monsters. Grover said. Of course there are, muttered Percy, gripping his pen tightly, ready to turn it into Riptide. Kyoko, though, felt it was something else besides just monsters nearby. It literally felt like something was standing right behind her, but every time she looked, there was nothing there. Something's definitely up, whatever this monster is, it's targeting me specifically. Kyoko thought as she went over all the monsters that fit the description of the one trailing her. When Kyoko realized just what it was, she cursed mentally, realizing she'll need to use Mahakala again if she hoped to be able to kill it. Guys, there's a monster following us right now, I know what it is, but I need to go off and kill it, myself. Grover, how many other monsters are trailing us? Kyoko muttered, not wanting to tip off the monsters in case they were sentient and smart enough to realize they knew they were there. I can smell TH3R right now, whispered Grover nervously, with Kyoko nodding as she looked at the three. Think you guys can handle the other two while I deal with mine? Kyoko asked, with Percy and Annabeth nodding. Yeah, we've got this, Percy replied. Looking at them for a moment, Kyoko nodded before immediately dashing off into the forest. Like she guessed, the monster she felt watching her followed after her, making the Echidna smirk. That's right, chase me, hide from me, and when the moment arrives, you'll strike. Kyoko thought, knowing exactly what the monster was, the Hidebahind. The Hidebahind was a monster that was known to stalk and hunt people that get lost in the forest. Its name came from the fact that it hides behind its prey and it keeps hiding behind them, waiting for the time to strike. Even if its prey is aware that it, or at least something, is following them, the Hidebahind will always be faster than its prey when they try looking for it, with the Hidebahind being able to always hide behind them. It would continue stalking its prey, waiting for the moment to strike and kill its prey. Its abilities included enhanced speed and strength, invisibility, shapeshifting, and of course, hiding. Kyoko would be nervous of facing such a monster, but thanks to Mahakala, this time she's the one with the advantage. Finally, Kyoko stopped in a clearing and unsealed her katana while activating her Magicum Sharingan. Okay, you wanna play hide and seek, let's play. Kyoko said, twirling her sword in her hand while constantly looking around her. She needed to draw the Hidebahind out before she used Mahakala, given she'd need its exact location to be able to kill it within her 10-second window. As Kyoko looked around, she could just barely catch a glimpse of something moving quickly out of her sight. Speedy little bastard, aren't you? Muttered Kyoko, knowing the Hidebahind wouldn't be coming out until it was sure it has a chance to kill her. Alright fine, you want me, come and get me. Kyoko thought, stabbing her katana into the ground before closing her eyes and crossing her arms, leaving herself completely open to be attacked, at least as far as the Hidebahind was concerned. Come on, come on, come on. Kyoko muttered under her breath as she channeled chakra to her ears to hear every sound around her. For several moments, Kyoko could only hear the sound of the wind, trees and bush rustling, birds chirping. Then suddenly, everything fell silent around her, with Kyoko tensing up in preparation for the attack she knew was coming. Not a moment later, Kyoko's eyes snapped open as she shouted. Mahakala. Picking up her katana, Kyoko turned to get the first glimpse of the elusive Hidebahind. The Hidebahind was tall, very tall, standing at least twice as tall as a full-grown adult. Its arms and legs were literally just bones, with its skin pulled taut against them, clawed hands and feet, disturbing sickle-like protrusions emerging from its palms, a hunched back with sticks poking out of it, and finally a creepy wooden mask-like face, with empty black eye sockets, and its mouth was open, displaying rows of jagged wooden teeth. Looking at the monster, and possibly being the first person to see it, Kyoko could only think of one thing to say. Man, you're one ugly motherfucker. No wonder you like to hide behind people. Kyoko said with a smirk, taunting the beast before moving in for the kill. Not wanting to waste another second, Kyoko decapitated the Hidebahind before cutting its body down the middle just to be on the safe side and make sure it's really dead. Once time resumed, Kyoko panted as she watched the Hidebahind's body dissolve into dust, leaving behind the spoils of war. Picking it up, Kyoko saw it was a dark brown-headed cloak. Wanting to see what it could do, Kyoko put the cloak on and pulled up the hood. Looking down at herself, the Echidna was surprised when she couldn't see her body anymore, and in its place was a dark shadowy form, emitting wisps of shadow-like smoke. This'll definitely come in handy. Kyoko thought, taking the cloak off and sealing it away, knowing she had to get back to the others in case they needed help with the other monsters. But Percy, Annabeth and Grover. Not long after Kyoko had run off into the forest to deal with her own monster, the remaining 3 questers had quickly run off in the opposite direction to hopefully deal with their own monsters. "Any ideas, Annabeth?" Percy asked as they ran, with Annabeth shaking her head. "No, not unless I saw what monsters we're dealing with. Normally in this situation, I'd say they were hellhounds, but given what we've encountered so far, with the Jersey Devil, and there being some unknown monster that Kyoko's dealing with, I don't know. The best I could say is we split up and hope the monsters split up as well. Grover and I will deal with one, and you deal with the other. Think you handle that, Seaweed Brain?" Annabeth said, with Percy nodding as he uncapped Riptide. "Yeah, definitely," replied Percy. "Alright, you go left, we'll go right," Annabeth said. Nodding, Percy immediately made a sharp turn and ran off to the left, while Annabeth and Grover ran to the right. "Grover, is the monster still chasing us?" Annabeth asked, with Grover sniffing the air and nodding with a shudder. "Yeah, it's still chasing us, and the other one's after Percy," Grover replied, with Annabeth nodding as she pulled out her knife. "Okay, here's a plan. I'll distract the monster while you hide, and when you see an opening, take it and attack. Kill it if you can," Annabeth said, with Grover looking at her in surprise and worry. "Wouldn't it be better if I distracted the monster and you killed it?" Grover asked, since Annabeth would be better suited for attacking the monster. "No, I'd be better at holding its attention while you attacked. Now go," Annabeth said, with Grover jumping slightly before quickly ducking down behind some rocks while Annabeth kept running with the monster chasing after her. "I may not know how to use it, but I don't really have a choice," Annabeth thought, unhooking the Fury's whip, knowing it'd at least allow her to keep the monster at a distance. Finally, Annabeth stopped running and turned to face the monster chasing her, only to recoil at what she saw. It looked to be some mutated cross between a man and a goat, with insanity and bloodlust shining in its blood-red eyes. It was also holding a wicked-looking axe in one hand. The goatman, because of course it's the goatman, Annabeth thought, seeing she was being chased by yet another monster or cryptid that shouldn't exist. Annabeth swore if they survived this quest, she's going to look up every single urban or mythological creature outside of the Greek pantheon and find out all she can about them. Annabeth was pulled from her thoughts when Goatman let out a cross between a scream and a bleat before it leapt at her with its axe. Rolling out of the way, Annabeth swung her whip as it lit up with hellfire and cut across Goatman's back, getting a cry of pain from the monster. And the demigod couldn't deny the satisfaction she got at managing to get a hit in. Though her satisfaction didn't last, as Goatman screeched angrily at her before charging with surprising speed. "Whoa," Annabeth said, jumping back as Goatman swung its axe at her chest before she was forced to keep moving back as the monster swung at her wildly. Unfortunately, Annabeth soon found herself backed against a tree, with Goatman swinging its axe straight for her head. Acting quickly, Annabeth ducked under the swing before plunging her dagger into Goatman's stomach, getting another cry of pain from the monster. However, Goatman then backhanded Annabeth across her face, sending her flying away from it and onto the ground. Groaning, Annabeth rubbed her head from the strength behind Goatman's hit, only to gulp when she saw Goatman standing over her with her dagger in hand. Reaching for her whip, Annabeth paled when she saw it had been knocked out of her hand. Looking back at Goatman, who cackled wickedly as it held her own dagger up, ready to stab her. Closing her eyes, Annabeth prepared herself for the end, only to suddenly hear Goatman cry out in pain, followed by the sound of something hitting the ground. Opening her eyes, Annabeth was shocked to see Grover standing in front of her holding Goatman's bloody axe, while the monster itself was on the ground before dissolving into dust. "Are you alright, Annabeth?" Grover asked, shaking as he held the bloody axe, snapping Annabeth out of her surprise. Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for the help," Annabeth said while getting up off the ground. Just then, Kyoko ran through the trees, stopping when she saw Annabeth and Grover. "Hey, I took care of my monster, did you get yours?" Kyoko asked, taking note of the axe Grover had. "Yeah, Grover just killed Goatman. What about you?" Annabeth asked, wondering what monster Kyoko killed. "Goatman, that'd explain the axe. I took care of the Hidebahind. Come on, let's see if Percy's gotten his," Kyoko said, with the other two nodding before they ran off in the direction Percy went. "But Percy?" Percy panted as he ran through the forest, having not stopped since he split off from Annabeth and Grover. He could still hear the monster that was chasing after him and knew he couldn't stop, not until he at least had an idea of how to kill whatever monster was after him. Pulling out a water bottle, Percy quickly took the cap off and drank half the bottle before pouring the rest over his head. Instantly, he felt his energy restored and then some. Knowing this was his chance to fight the monster, Percy stopped running and faced the creature, seeing just what was chasing him. The first thing he noticed was just how thin the monster was, to the point it looked emancipated. It had rotted skin that was pulled taut over its bones, long gangly arms with sharp claws, its head was a wolf skull with empty eye sockets, antlers on its head, and patches of grey fur on the back of its head, arms and legs. Percy also noticed how it didn't seem to hold still, it was constantly jittery, as if it hadn't eaten in months. Is this a Wendigo? Percy thought, going off what Kyoko told them about Wendigos, and figured this might be one, even more so, given the way it seemed to look at him hungrily. Before Percy could contemplate further, the Wendigo roared before appearing in front of him in a burst of speed. Eyes widening, Percy quickly raised his sword and blocked the Wendigo's claws, the demigod then raising his foot and driving it into the monster's chest, knocking it away. Running towards the Wendigo, Percy ducked under a swipe from its claws and slashed at its left leg, leaving a deep gash on it, getting a cry of pain from the monster. Acting on instinct, Percy slammed Reptide's hilt into the Wendigo's head, dazing it, before spinning around it and driving his sword straight into the Wendigo's back. Releasing a breath he didn't know he was holding, Percy pulled his sword out and looked at the Wendigo as it clutched its wound before stumbling into a tree which it slumped against. Approaching the wounded Wendigo cautiously, not sure if it'd suddenly attack again, Percy was confused and surprised when the Wendigo suddenly let out a deep raspy laughter. "What are you laughing at?" Percy said, not really expecting a response, only to be surprised further when the Wendigo actually spoke. "I laugh at you, demigod, you and the rest of your foolish kind. All of you, nothing but disposable pawns for the gods to use for their own amusement. But you are the most pathetic, son of Poseidon," said the Wendigo, much to Percy's surprise, both at the fact the monster could speak and that it knew who his father was. "How do you know that?" Percy asked, his curiosity over what the Wendigo was saying getting the better of him, wanting to hear what else it said. "You have the same disgusting stench as your father and the rest of your filthy siblings that I've encountered. The scent of monsters and rapists," said the Wendigo, cackling cruelly, while Percy clenched his fists tightly at the reminder of what Poseidon did to Medusa and probably other women as well. "What about my siblings?" Percy questioned, noticing how the Wendigo included his half-siblings, the other children of Poseidon. This only seemed to make the Wendigo laugh even more. "What's that saying you humans have? Ah yes, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I have existed for centuries, boy, and I have seen many of your brethren, human and monsters alike, they're all the same as their father. Raping women they desire, but cannot have, always taking them again and again, until death would be considered a mercy. Not even men would be safe from their lust. After all, look at how the gods take men and women for themselves, for their own pleasure. Just like your father did with Medusa, and how your namesake had done, after he took her head, Perseus Jackson," the Wendigo declared wickedly, while Percy turned a mix between deathly pale and sickly green at what he was hearing. "That is who you are, boy. Sired by a rapist and named after a rapist who defiled the corpse of the one he killed. I wonder, how long will it be until you follow in their footsteps? Who will you force yourself on first, your pretty little companions, or perhaps you'll prove worse than your father and defile your own mother?" shouted the Wendigo, taking pleasure in tormenting its soon-to-be killer. That's when Percy shouted in anger, before stabbing his sword straight into the Wendigo's head. But he didn't stop there, as he repeatedly stabbed the Wendigo's body, while its empty eye socket still looking straight at him. As if even in the death, it was mocking him. Even as the Wendigo's body dissolved into dust, Percy kept stabbing and slashing it where it was, with tears in his eyes. "I'm not like them, I'm not like them, I'm not like them, I'm not like them, I'm not like them," Percy mentally chanted. "I'm not like them," Percy shouted, before falling to his knees panting. "Percy?" Looking, Percy saw Kyoko, Annabeth and Grover looking at him in worry. "Are you alright?" Kyoko asked, with Percy laughing bitterly. "No, I'm not," Percy muttered, doubting he could ever say he'll be alright ever again. After a few moments, Percy felt hands on his shoulders. Looking, he saw Annabeth and Grover by his sides. "We aren't our parents," Annabeth said, with Percy nodding after a moment before standing up. "Here, I'm guessing it was left by the monster you killed," said Kyoko, handing Percy his spoils of war. Looking it over, Percy saw it was a white-headed cloak with a Wendigo's antlers on the hood. With that, the four questers continued on their way towards California. Kyoko, Annabeth, Percy and Grover looked over a burning pit with the daughter of Athena having an annoyed expression on her face, while Grover looked terrified and relieved. "For the record, I blame you," Annabeth stated while looking at Percy, who looked at her with wide eyes. "Me? What did I do?" demanded Percy, annoyed that he was being blamed. "Oh gee, let me think, you were the one with the bright idea to attack the Chupacabra and ended up attracting the whole pack," said Annabeth, glaring at the son of Poseidon, who had the decency to blush in embarrassment. They had been traveling through New Mexico, continuing their way to California when they had come across another monster that they all recognized as the Chupacabra. with Grover being absolutely terrified at seeing it, with Percy suggesting that they take it out just in case it caught their scent. Though Annabeth suggested simply sneaking around it, only for Percy to go ahead and attack the monster. This leading to it letting out a cry that ended up bringing out nearly 30 more chupacabra, leading to a rather long chase. With Kyoko sending a few clones ahead to set up a trap since she was still feeling winded from having to use her Manjikam Sharingan repeatedly in the past few days. Leading the pack to a large pit filled with oil before igniting it with a grand fireball. With the group now watching the chupacabra burn to ash. Well, how was I supposed to know there was more than one? Percy retorted, not thinking there'd be more than one chupacabra. It should have been obvious, actually. Given all the sightings in Central and South America, along with in the Caribbean. Stated Kyoko, with Percy giving her an annoyed look while Annabeth smirked. I knew we should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque. But knew. You said go right, well we went right and look what happened. Grover said while letting out a scream bleat given the chupacabra seemed to have been particularly focused on him. And given how they were known to drink goat blood, it was understandable for them to target what was the equivalent of an all-you-can-eat buffet. Soon, the flames were put out, with all the chupacabra were dead, leaving behind the spoils of war. Jumping into the pit, Kyoko saw the spoils left behind were some leather hides and skulls. What did they leave behind? Annabeth asked. Just some leather hides and skulls. Replied Kyoko, before sealing the spoils away, figuring they'd make good trophies, or they could see if Cabin 9 could use them as materials for weapons or armor. Once she finished sealing away the spoils, Kyoko jumped out of the pit before the four continued on their way. Come on, we'll hopefully find some place where we can get a car and get to Las Vegas, from there it'll be a straight path to Los Angeles. Said Kyoko, with the others nodding in agreement, relieved that they were almost to their destination and still had plenty of time to spare as well. Now they just had to hope nothing would happen to delay them. Later. The questers had eventually arrived at a small town where they were able to steal a truck and drive towards Las Vegas. Kyoko had been the driver again and, after some near pleading from her friends, had driven at a more reasonable speed rather than just driving in a straight line towards Vegas. Thankfully, the truck had run out of gas just outside of Las Vegas, with the four walking the rest of the way towards the city. However, while they were making good time, Annabeth, Percy, and Grover were starting to get tired from the lack of sleep and not having taken a break for a while. With this in mind, it was decided they'd find a hotel to stay at for the night before continuing their journey in the morning. Eventually the group came across the Lotus Hotel and Casino. Kyoko narrowed her eyes that huge neon flower entrance, she wasn't sure what it was, but something felt off about this place. Maybe it was the fact no one was going in or out, despite the fact the place was clearly open, but Kyoko was sure this wasn't a normal casino and hotel. Hey, kids. You look tired. You want to come in and sit down? Said the doorman while smiling at them. He seems normal enough, but it could also be a disguise. Kyoko thought, but figured that wouldn't hurt too much to go inside. And if it came down to it, then they could easily fight their way out. But the moment the group walked through the revolving door, their eyes widened in amazement. Bo Grover said as they looked around. The whole lobby was a giant game room. There was an indoor waterslide snaking around the glass elevator, which went straight up at least 40 floors. There was a climbing wall on the side of one building and an indoor bungee jumping bridge. There were virtual reality suits with working laser guns. And hundreds of video games, each one the size of a widescreen TV. There were a few other kids playing, but not that many. None of them waiting for any of the games. There were waitresses and snack bars all around, serving every kind of food you can imagine. Yeah, this place definitely isn't normal. Kyoko thought, knowing no normal casino could possibly be this extravagant. Hey. Said a bellop, at least they guessed he was a bellop. Welcome to the Lotus Casino. Here's your room key. The bellop said, while holding out a room key. But we haven't paid for a room. Said Percy confused, only for the bellop to laugh. No, the bill's taken care of. No extra charges, no tips. Just go on up to the top floor, room 4001. If you need anything, like extra bubbles for the hot tub or ski targets for the shooting range or whatever, just call the front desk. Here are your Lotus Cash cards. They work in the restaurants and on all the games and rides. Said the bellop, handing Percy the room key and giving them all green plastic credit cards. This just confused them even more, since who would pay for their room and these cards? How much is on here? Kyoko asked, finding this more and more suspicious. What do you mean? Said the bellop, his brows knitting together as if not understanding her question. I mean, when does it run out of cash? Said Kyoko, this just made the bellop laugh again. Oh, you're making a joke. Hey, that's cool. Enjoy your stay. The bellop said, before walking off. This place is definitely weird. Said Percy, looking at the room key and Lotus Cash card. Yeah, that guy made it sound like these things don't have a limit. Kyoko said, frowning as she felt like she should know what was happening but couldn't quite place it. Well, let's just stay for the night and then leave first thing in the morning. Suggested Annabeth, agreeing that something was strange about this place, but it'd also be good for them to get a decent night's sleep and relax a little, given everything they've been through the past few days. Nodding in agreement, the four took the elevator upstairs and checked out their room. Only to be surprised when it was just as lavish as the rest of the place. It was a suite with 4 separate bedrooms and a bar stocked with candy, sodas, and chips. A hotline to room service. Fluffy towels and water beds with feather pillows. A big screen television with satellite and high-speed internet. The balcony had its own hot tub, and sure enough, there was a skeet shooting machine and a shotgun, so you could launch clay pigeons right out over the Las Vegas skyline and plug them with your gun. Oh, goodness. This place is. Annabeth trailed off, looking around the suite in amazement. Sweet, absolutely sweet. Said Grover. Okay, I know something's definitely up. Kyoko thought, checking the closet of her room and find it filled with clothes that fit her perfectly. After taking a shower and changing into a spare set of clothes, Kyoko exited the room to see the others had also showered and changed, along with helping themselves to the snack bar. So what now? Sleep? Annabeth asked, looking away from the National Geographic Channel. Playtime? Percy and Grover said, grinning as they held up their cash cards. Personally, Kyoko would prefer if they all simply left right now and didn't look back. But she also didn't fault her friends for wanting a moment to relax and act like everything is normal. Especially with everything they've seen and learned since this quest started. So, they all headed back down to the ground floor, with Percy, Annabeth, and Grover going off to play different games and activities. Kyoko looked around before her eyes fell on a shop selling manga and anime. Well, if these Lotus Cash cards don't have any spending limit, I might as well take advantage of it while we're here. Kyoko thought as her eyes gleaming in excitement. Later. Kyoko ended up also going to a shop selling video games and another selling figurines, and even one selling complete replicas of some of her favorite characters' outfits. She knew she should stay focused, along with realizing how no one so much as batted an eye whenever she sealed her purchases away. But Kyoko couldn't help it when she saw all the things she wanted to buy. After visiting probably a dozen different shops, Kyoko had eventually found a ramen stand to get something to eat at. Glancing at the only other customer, a 10-year-old boy with shaggy black hair looking like he just got out of bed, dark brown eyes, and olive skin. He was also had several cards and mini figurines on the counter in front of him. What's that? Kyoko asked curiously, with the boy looking at her for a moment before smiling. It's my Mythamagic collection, a card game I really like. Said the boy. The card game? Said Kyoko, with the boy nodding. Yeah, it's based on Greek mythology, with all the gods, monsters, and titans. I already have all the figures and cards, except Hades, that's the last one I need. The boy said, with Kyoko smiling slightly at how excited he was talking about his game. Sounds pretty cool. By the way, I'm Kyoko Echidna. Kyoko introduced, holding out her hand which the boy shook. Nice to meet you Kyoko, I'm Nai. Naiko? A sudden shout made Kyoko and the now named Naiko jump slightly before turning to the source. Kyoko saw it was a girl her age, with long silky dark hair, jet black eyes, olive skin, a slender build, and being a little shorter than average. Wow, she's really beautiful. Kyoko thought, at seeing this girl was comparable to Thalia. Naiko, there you are. What have I said about wandering off? Said the girl, whom Kyoko guessed was Naiko's sister, sternly, while Naiko looked down sheepishly. Not to. Sorry Bianca, I just wanted to get something to eat and thought I could get back fast enough. Naiko said, Bianca sighing at his words. Well just tell me next time, I was really worried. Said Bianca before taking notice of Kyoko and Naiko's Mythamagic collection, making her groan quietly. I'm really sorry for my brother if he was bothering you about his game. Bianca said, knowing once Naiko started going on about something, he didn't stop until he tired himself out. It's fine and I actually asked him about. I'm Kyoko Echidna by the way, nice to meet you. Kyoko said, shaking Bianca's hand. You too, Kyoko. I'm Bianca D'Angelo, and this is my little brother Naiko. And sorry, but we need to get back to our room. Said Bianca, while looking at her brother and motioning him to gather his collection, with Naiko nodding and started gathering everything up. Once he had everything, Naiko hopped off his stool with Bianca taking his hand. See ya Naiko, Bianca. Kyoko said, waving at the siblings, which they returned before vanishing into the crowd. Turning back to her ramen, Kyoko frowned when she saw that no one was in the stand anymore. Did they go on a break or something? Kyoko thought when she didn't see anyone or hear anything coming from the back. It only got stranger when she looked up and saw the lights were now considerably dimmer and were starting to flicker. Yeah, cause this doesn't scream horror movie. Kyoko muttered, feeling something off, even more so than when she and her friends first arrived here. Kyoko then stiffened slightly when she could no longer hear anything outside the stand. No footsteps, no talking, no games, nothing. Subtly turning her head, Kyoko instinctively moved her hand to her weapons when she saw that the casino was now completely devoid of people. "I wouldn't do that," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere. Kyoko froze, both at the sudden voice and the wave of power that washed over her. It was unlike anything she felt before, the sheer power made Kyoko feel small, as if she were in the presence of a giant. Even the times her father unleashed his killing intent on her during her training, or when her mother would unleash her godly power to get her used to being in a god's presence, this feeling it made both her parents seem insignificant in comparison. Looking at her hands, Kyoko saw they were shaking from the power, and she knew that whoever or whatever was here would have killed her if they wanted to. As if they were stepping on an ant. Echidna stiffened when she heard footsteps echoing in the empty casino, and they were getting close. Soon the footsteps stopped and Kyoko could just see someone standing in the corner of her eyes, but she didn't dare look at them, out of self-preservation of angering them. The person then sat down in the seat next to Kyoko, finally letting the Echidna see the stranger. It was an adult male with slicked back, dark black hair, deathly pale skin that he almost seemed transparent, dark sunglasses covering his eyes, and wearing a jet black suit with silver trimming and a strange pin that looked like a rune or a symbol that Kyoko couldn't place. The strangest part was that he seemed to be emitting black smoke from his body. Kyoko racked her brain going over all the descriptions of the gods her mother gave her to try and figure out who this guy is, but she just came up blank on who he was. She could only guess he was a god her mother didn't know very well and Kyoko felt it might be true, he wasn't a god of the Greek pantheon. "You're half right, I prefer not wasting my time with the Olympians and their petty arguments. But they do know of me and if they met me, they'd likely be dust," the man said smirking. This made Kyoko gulp in fear, since this guy was obviously powerful to casually talk about turning the Olympians into dust. And he said they knew of him, meaning he was part of the Greek pantheon, but he wasn't a god. Kyoko also guessed he wasn't a titan, otherwise he wouldn't be talking to her and would have just killed her instead. That only left one option as to what he was. The primordial. An elder god, one of the first in existence, born from chaos itself and sentient aspects of the universe, with complete and total control over their aspects, even surpassing the gods and titans. But that in mind, Kyoko already knew who this was, given her surroundings and the darkness outside. "Earbus," Kyoko said, with the man now smiling, showing unnaturally pointed teeth, and leaned against the counter while lowering his sunglasses, revealing his eyes. Rather than normal eyes, they were instead a solid black color. Looking at them made Kyoko feel like she was falling into an endless abyss while also having her lungs filled with smoke. "Greetings, Kyoko Echidna," said Earbus while putting his glasses back up, much to Kyoko's relief, since she could breathe again. "Why are you here?" Kyoko asked, both curious and worried as to why a primordial wanted to speak with her, especially the primordial of darkness and the mist. Earbus shrugged and folded his arms on the counter. "Curiosity, boredom, a dozen or so reasons. After all, it's not every day a demigod like you is born, one from the Queen of Olympus. If it were any other god, no one would care, but when people hear that Hera, the goddess of marriage and known for her loyalty to her man-whore husband, sired a demigod, it gets people interested," stated Earbus, with Kyoko gulping, since that could be either good or bad, depending on whose attention she had on her. "And why are you here, Lord Earbus?" Kyoko asked, worried and even afraid of why a primordial was speaking with her, while Earbus smirked and chuckled, with the sound only unnerving Kyoko at how wrong it sounded. "You don't have to be afraid or so formal. I honestly couldn't care less for such titles. As for why I'm here, I would offer you my blessing, with it you'll have access to umbrakinesis, surpassing that of even children of Hades. Along with control over mist and the mist," Earbus said, with Kyoko looking at him in complete shock, not expecting to have a primordial offer her their blessing. "Yo, you want T22 guy give your BL blessing to me? Why?" asked Kyoko, unable to keep the shock out of her voice. "As I said before, a dozen or so reasons. But truthfully, when you exist for as long as I have, you try to find entertainment wherever you can. With my blessing, I'll be able to keep a closer eye on your adventures, and something tells me it'll be quite the show," Earbus said, smirking, before raising his hand to snap his fingers. "Wait. Would you be able to lift a curse?" asked Kyoko, making Earbus look at her with a raised brow. "Of course. What curse?" Earbus questioned. "The one placed on Medusa by Athena. I'd ask that instead, you would lift Medusa's curse and return her to normal, and if possible, revive her sisters as well." Kyoko said, seeing this as the perfect opportunity to not only turn Medusa back to normal, but also give her a second chance at life, hopefully with her sisters as well. Erebus looked at her in intrigue and amusement. You'd reject a primordial's blessing and instead ask for me to help someone else. Even if it means not getting access to that kind of power. Erebus asked in amusement, while Kyoko nodded. Yes. Replied Kyoko, knowing she was missing out on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but she swore she'd help Medusa and she will. The primordial smirked, before chuckling again, before he snapped his fingers loudly. With Kyoko looked down in surprise as a black aura surrounded her, for a moment. It's done, when Medusa reforms from the underworld, she will once again be human, with a few improvements, and her sisters will be restored along with her. I've even granted you my blessing, as well. Erebus said, surprising Kyoko, before she nodded in thanks. Thank you Erebus. Said Kyoko, with Erebus nodding, before standing up and turned to leave, only to pause and turn his head back towards Kyoko. Oh, I'd also suggest you and your friends leave, you've already spent 4 days here and have a deadline. Not to mention, I can sense a monster is on your tail, a powerful at that. Better get moving, Kyoko Ichiha. Erebus stated, before snapping his fingers again. Kyoko gasped as everything around her suddenly returned to normal, with the casino once again filled with people. Though not a moment later, she cursed and immediately exited the raiment stand. Gods damn it. The Lotus Eaters, it should have been obvious. Kyoko thought, berating herself for not having seen it from the beginning. And if Erebus was right, she and her friends have already been here for 4 days, even if it only felt like a few hours. Meaning they now only had 2 days until the summer solstice, just great. If Toussaint was here, he would put me through Genjutsu drills for a year, with his eternal Manjicum Sharingan. Kyoko thought, while shiver at the thought of what her father would have done to her if he ever found out about this. Running around the casino, Kyoko soon found Percy and from his expression, he's likely figured out what's happening as well. Kyoko, we need to leave now. Everyone here, they all think it's a different year. Percy said, having asked several people what year was and got different answers from all of them, some going back as far 1977. Yeah, it's the Lotus Eaters, they mess with your perception of time, a few hours in here is a few decades outside, while making you addicted to whatever they're offering to make you stay. You find Grover, I'll find Annabeth so we can get out of here now. Kyoko said, Percy nodded in agreement before they split up to find their friends. Kyoko soon found Annabeth building a virtual 3D city. Annabeth. Hey, we need to go now. Kyoko said, grabbing Annabeth's arm, only for the blonde to pull away. Oh? What are you talking about? I've just got the towers. Yeah, it's great, but let's go. Besides we both know you just end up killing everyone in your city to satisfy your own sadism. Kyoko cut off, with Annabeth turning and glared at her. I'm not a sadi, Annabeth said, only to stop and blinked a few times before her eyes widened in realization. What? Oh gods, how long have we been here? Said Annabeth. 4 days, Percy's getting Grover, we need to leave. Kyoko said quickly, with Annabeth nodding before running for the exit. They met Percy dragging Grover along the way, much to Kyoko's relief, as she hoped they'd be able to avoid whatever monster Erebus warned them about. They already wasted enough time and couldn't afford to waste any more. Unfortunately, they were stopped by the bellop from before running up to them. He was about to say something until Kyoko grabbed him by his collar and lifted him into the air, glaring at him with her Sharingan. Buddy, I'm in a really bad mood, most in part due to this god's forsaken place. And if you don't want this place to be caught in the middle of a war between the gods, then I suggest you and your lotus-eating friends get the fuck out of our way. Kyoko growled, with the bellop paling at the thought. Right. I hope you enjoyed your stay. The bellop stuttered, with Kyoko dropping him and immediately running off, while her friends looked at her with wide eyes. The questers then heard someone giggling darkly, before freezing when they spoke. My oh my, you have quite the temper, daughter of Hera. Said a low and seductive female voice. Looking, the group gulped when they saw the person who spoke standing right in front of the exit. The person in question was an impossibly beautiful adult woman with pale skin, long sweeping light blue hair with 2 braids on either side of her face, large curving horns sprouting from the sides of her head, pointed ears, dark blue eyes with slit pupils, and elongated canines. Her attire consisted only of dark blue arm sleeves and a matching shoulder cape and dark blue leg restraints, while her breasts and crotch were covered in light blue scales, while the rest of her body was completely exposed. Kyoko, who or what is that? Annabeth asked, while reaching for her knife, with Percy doing the same with Riptide and Grover his axe. I'm actually lost. Kyoko confessed, while unsealing her katana, doubting anyone in the casino would actually take the time to look away from their games to see what was happening. The woman giggled at Kyoko's words, before smiling viciously. Of course you wouldn't know who I am, Kyoko Uchiha, at least while I'm in this form. I am Echidna, mother of monsters. Revealed Echidna, surprising the questers and making them worry of facing a monster like her. Why are you here? What do you want from us? Annabeth questioned, with Echidna giggling again. Why? I simply wish to see what the daughter of Hera was capable of, rather than having one of my own children test her. I believed this warranted my personal attentio, and Echidna cooed, with Kyoko gripping her katana tightly, tempted to use her other blades, but couldn't risk using them now. Well, be careful what you wish for. Kyoko said, before speeding behind Echidna and swung her sword to decapitate her, only for Echidna to block her strike with a finger. Surprised at her reaction time, Kyoko used the momentum to flip over Echidna, with her fist pulled back to smash into her face. But once again, Echidna blocked the strike with a bored look on her face. How disappointing, I expected more, Kyoko. Echidna said, with Kyoko gritting her teeth as her magicum flared to life. While she didn't want to use her magicum and further deteriorate her eyesight, Kyoko knew they couldn't waste any more time here, fighting Echidna. Especially since they were still inside the Lotus Hotel. Meaning more time could have passed by, and they still had a time limit to find the Master Bolt and Helm of Darkness. Mahakala. Kyoko said as time froze around her, with her eye bleeding from using the jutsu. Landing on the ground, Kyoko swung her katana at Echidna's neck, decapitating the mother of monsters. What Kyoko failed to see though, was Echidna smirking, despite supposedly being frozen in time. Once time resumed, Percy, Annabeth and Grover saw Kyoko on her knees with Echidna's body dissolving into gold dust. Kyoko, did you use your magicum again? Annabeth asked, worried, since that's now 3 times Kyoko's used her magicum Sharingan, making it even closer to her going blind. Yeah, I had to. We've already lost enough time and couldn't afford to waste any more while fighting. Said Kyoko as she shook her head and wiped the blood from her eyes, as her vision distorted for a moment before settling. Nodding, the 3 knew Kyoko was right, they couldn't waste what time they had left fighting monsters. They needed to reach the underworld quickly. Standing up, Kyoko looked at what spoils was left from Echidna, only to grin widely and look at Annabeth, with the daughter of Athena shaking her head and giving the Uchiha a warning look. Don't you dare. Annabeth warned, knowing what Kyoko was thinking, while Percy and Grover slowly backed away to the exit, but still were amused at what spoils were left. Oh Annie, it seems that your look is now complete. Said Kyoko, while holding it up, as Annabeth glared at her. The reason being was that the spoils of war left by Echidna was a skin-tight black leather suit with blue spiraling designs on it. You now have a whip, a helmet, and the leather suit. You can finally fulfill your dream of being a true sadist, Annie. Said Kyoko, while grinning widely. I'm not as sad, let's just get to Los Angeles. Annabeth muttered darkly, while grabbing the suit from Kyoko, knowing her friend would just find a way to sneak it to her, anyway. And Annabeth wasn't going to say no to a potentially useful spoils of war, either. Especially if it had some kind of ability that will make Kyoko envious and regret giving it to her as a prank. Unknown location. Meanwhile, Echidna sat in her cave, smiling at the image of the 4 questers, specifically at Kyoko, as they took a cab to Los Angeles. She hadn't actually been killed. What Kyoko killed was just a replica of herself, sent to see what the Uchiha was capable of. And Echidna hadn't been disappointed in seeing Kyoko's ability. You just become more and more interesting, Kyoko, being able to freeze time. I do look forward to seeing what else you are capable of and what you'll do. Echidna commented, interested in observing Kyoko longer now, to see what else she'll do. Perhaps, she'll even approach her again, but not as Echidna, as who she truly is. As the primordial deity and chaos karma dragon, Tiamat. What if Naruto x Hera Percy Jackson harem end here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.